My family exiled me from family chat after I refused to fund my sisters. Then they tried to steal $80,000 using my name. So I gave them a lesson. We think it's best you step away for now, the note read. A group chat of all things. My parents, aunt and uncle were all present, albeit my uncle rarely spoke. But this time, he didn't have to. The silence was plenty. The message struck me. I was reheating some leftover curry, thinking about finishing that spreadsheet before bed, when I spotted this. We've discussed it, and we think it's best if you step away from the family for now. Vanessa needs space. We all do. My aunt gave a thumbs up beneath it. Just like that. No call, no explanation. Just a thumb. I stared at the screen for a full minute before typing. Understood. I'll respect that and step away from the family fund too. I didn't wait for a response. That night I entered into the joint account I had been quietly managing for 5 years, the one that paid mom's insulin, assisted dad in refinancing the second mortgage, and kept Vanessa's car running when her checks were delayed. I removed my automatic contributions. I then closed the account. My phone started vibrating, it buzzed continuously. By morning, there were 89 missed calls. My dad left the last voicemail. His voice was unsteady, angry, and terrified. What happened? The bank flagged everything. Are you okay? Why would you? I replied to his reply with a single sentence. I respect your decision. That was before they discovered how much I'd quietly accomplished. You would have to go back to truly appreciate why that communication seemed like a betrayal. 5 years ago, Vanessa was hospitalized for the second time. Dad called me crying from a Walgreens parking lot. She's not gonna make it, son, he informed me. They won't admit her without insurance. We're tapped out. That night I depleted my money and paid for rehab out of pocket. Vanessa appeared stable for a time. Everyone declared it a miracle. But they never mentioned, not once, that I had made it possible. Nobody offered to repay me. Nobody even asked how I was doing. But it did not end there. When mom was diagnosed with diabetes, I began covering her medications. Dad's hours were being reduced at the warehouse. Vanessa fluctuated in her level of stability. And every time she crashed, they came to me, silently and desperately. At start, it was minor stuff. $300 here, a loan just for this month. Then they asked if I could help set things up. A type of family emergency pool. I was 27 and single, working 80-hour weeks in finance. It made logic, I reminded myself. I was able to afford it, so I did. I created a family fund in my name. I channeled payments for mom's prescriptions, Vanessa's therapy copays, and even the phone bill when they went behind. They granted me access to everything, including passwords, account numbers, and balances. Not because they trusted me, but because they did not want to deal with the situation. They referred to me as the responsible one. They meant the option that was most handy. My life became a record of silent sacrifices. Meanwhile, Vanessa spiraled repeatedly. She received a DUI in 2020 and I paid for her counsel. She moved in with a guy named Eric, who was certainly not abusive. And when she left him in the middle of the night, I was the one to Venmo her enough money for a hotel and groceries. I never received a cent back. They never inquired where the money came from. They never saw the line-by-line spreadsheet I created to keep myself afloat. They never noticed when I downgraded my apartment, skipped vacations, and ate oatmeal for dinner more nights than I'd want to confess because I had to. I was the financial barrier between them, and it collapsed. And for a while I was fine with it. Until the Christmas incident. It happened 2 years ago. Vanessa had a tantrum when I refused to buy her new tires after I had just paid her rent. She told my folks that I was making her feel judged. That night, I received a message from Dad. Just try to be a little more understanding. Son, she's in recovery. You don't know how hard that is. I snapped. Not openly or explosively, but something within me snapped like ice under pressure. I didn't respond. Instead, I tried something else. I began documenting everything. Every dollar delivered, every invoice paid, and every excuse they gave. I made backups, emailed myself statements, and gathered screenshots. Not to keep it from them just yet, but to remind myself that it was true. That I hadn't imagined the drain, the pattern, or the continual pulling without giving. Then, last month, things came to a head. Vanessa messaged the family group. Hey, I know money's tight, but could the fund cover a yoga retreat in Arizona? It's for my mental health. A yoga retreat. $3,200. I didn't respond. I waited. I was curious what they might say, and my father, the same man who helped me get out of debt twice last year, said, "Sounds like something you really need. Let's see what we can do." Mom responded with a heart emoji. That's when I understood they weren't simply exploiting me. They expected me to be manipulated. They assumed the fund was theirs and that I was a silent donor. Years had passed, and entitlement had replaced gratitude. But the kicker was the grenade in the room, which arrived just 2 nights before the message. We were on a family call, a monthly check-in that normally degenerated into Vanessa's therapy session, with me serving as the invisible ATM in the background. I tried to discuss my promotion. I had been promoted to director at the firm. Huge raise, enormous responsibility. Dad interrupted me mid-sentence. Sorry, can we circle back to Vanessa's housing? She's not feeling safe in her current unit. They intended to relocate her to a better region. With my assistance, certainly. I did not agree. I did not fight. I simply stated calmly, maybe it's time someone else stepped up. Silence. Cold, stony, and outraged. Then came the message 2 days later. We think it's best if you step away for now. Aunt Evelyn's thumbs up felt like a knife. They believed they were shutting me off. They had no idea they were cutting the cord to the sole thing holding their financial life together. I had been the silent stream beneath their lives. When I halted, their lights went out. The repercussions started in exactly 36 hours. First came the overdraft notices. Then Mom's pharmacist phoned me. Then Vanessa, the one who desired space, left a voicemail that began in a whisper and ended in a scream. Why would you do this? You knew I needed that payment. By Sunday morning the texts were unrelenting. Dad unleashed a volley of voice messages, like a guy disintegrating in real time. They excluded me from the family talk, as if I didn't belong. The mortgage bounced. I thought you handled the insurance. The car is uninsured now. What did you do to the utilities account? The bank locked our checking, said there were multiple red flags. You need to fix this. Fix this. As if I'd shattered something. As if I hadn't already stepped aside as requested. The actual issue was not that I stopped helping. They didn't comprehend how much I was holding everything together. Then came the family Zoom call. My cousin Emily set it up, pretended it was just a conversation. But as soon as I joined, I noticed their faces lined up in perfect little rectangles, like a jury. Mom's lips were pushed so tightly they appeared bloodless. Dad was pacing. Vanessa had tears running down her face. It appeared rehearsed. Aunt Evelyn sat smugly in a scarf and pearls, as if we were in family court. Why did you do this to us? Vanessa asked, her voice shaking. You just abandoned us. After everything I've done. I responded. You mean after I paid your rent, funded your rehab, and got mocked for saying no to your yoga retreat? That's not fair, she said. Fair, I demanded. You want fair? How about this? For 5 years I've covered your financial trail like a forensic janitor. I've cleaned up your messes, paid your overdrafts, bailed you out while you posted inspirational quotes about healing and alignment. And the moment I hesitate, you exile me from the family chat like I was disposable. Mom finally spoke. It wasn't exile. We were giving you space too. No, you weren't, I interrupted. You were siding with Vanessa again. Like you always do. You just found a polite way to tell me to disappear. So I did. Dad folded his arms. You didn't have to cancel the fund. I didn't cancel it, I explained. I closed it. In my name. Funded with my money. Managed by me. The family fund was never a trust. It was a leash. His face grew crimson. We trusted you. No, I replied. You used me. Then I opened the folder beside me and selected Share Screen. A spreadsheet appeared. Rows upon rows of payments. Dates. Amounts. Every dime is tracked. Rent, medical, utilities, repairs. Vanessa's retreat, which I almost paid for. I rectified the overdrafts. Aunt Evelyn's emergency dental visit. Even the Uber receipts from when I paid for Mom's ride to the hospital at 2 a.m., during a panic episode. Wow, Emily whispered. Who even keeps all this? Evelyn sneered. Someone who knew one day you'd gaslight him into thinking he made it all up, I asked, my gaze never leaving the screen. Then I selected the final tab. It displayed a running total. $87,421.13. There is no more sound. Dad stepped back from the camera, as if he had been slapped. You've been keeping tabs on us, Mom exclaimed, alarmed. No, I replied. I've been surviving you. Vanessa lurched at the screen, like a toddler throwing a tantrum. You're just bitter. You've always been bitter because no one gives you a gold star for being a good son. You want applause for acting like an adult. No, I said quietly. I just want boundaries. And I'm done being your financial safety net. That's rich, Evelyn mumbled. You think money is the only thing that matters? No, I replied. But it was the only thing you ever came to me for. Then I closed the spreadsheet, looked at the camera, and administered the fatal blow. I've already contacted the bank, all joint authorizations removed. My name is no longer on anything related to your accounts. The credit cards closed. The shared utility auto pays were canceled. The insurance premiums? You'll need to re-enroll yourselves. You wanted me to step away. This is what that looks like. Mom gave a gasp. Dad's face became pallid. Vanessa looked like she had been shot. Emily leaned back in awe. But I wasn't finished. I also spoke to a lawyer, I added. You'll be receiving documents in the next few days. I'm dissolving any legal ties between me and the family trust that was never formalized. Just in case someone tries to dip into my credit or open anything in my name again. You're overreacting, Vanessa yelled. You're cutting us off. I'm protecting myself, I explained. From now on, I'm not your plan B, not your fallback, not your free ride. Dad appeared broken, but said nothing. Mom was quietly sobbing now. Vanessa got up and stormed off screen, slamming something in the background. Evelyn reached forward and ended the phone without saying anything. I sat back, heart racing and hands trembling. But for the first time in a decade, I wasn't terrified of the consequences, because all I had to lose was the weight I'd been carrying for far too long. The hush following the call was almost spooky. For the first time in years, my phone did not ring with a "Hey, quick favor," or "Can you just cover this one thing?" There were no guilt-laced voicemail messages. No crying emojis. Vanessa did not make any passive-aggressive posts about a family who turned their backs. Nothing. It was as if I had disappeared. At first I wondered if they'd finally got it. Perhaps they are learning to stand on their own. But I should have known better. 10 days later, I received an email from an address I didn't know. Clearly, this is a burning. With one sentence. You've ruined everything. Bills were attached as screenshots. Vanessa received an eviction notice. The power company has issued a final warning. A credit card application was declined, with my name listed as a former co-signer. They were disintegrating swiftly and chaotically. And the issue with individuals who are accustomed to relying on you is that they do not fall gracefully. They crash and blame you for the landing. That same week, Mom arrived at my office. I was attending a meeting. My assistant entered, wide-eyed. There's a woman here, says she's your mother, won't leave. I walked into the lobby where she was pale and shivering, carrying an envelope full of paperwork. I didn't know where else to go, she remarked in a scratchy voice. Your dad's sleeping on the couch. Vanessa hasn't left her room in 3 days. The landlord says he's changing the locks next week. I didn't say anything, so she played her final card. I raised you, she retorted, suddenly angry. I gave you life, and this is how you repay us. That's when I laughed, not loud or nasty, just hollow, like air escaping from a damaged pipe. You gave me life, I explained. And then you spent 30 years trying to convince me I owed you for it. She flinched. I stepped forward. I didn't come to you at 22 and say, please, let me be responsible for your dysfunction. Let me carry your debt. Let me save my sister over and over again while you nod and enable her. Let me sacrifice my mental health, my relationships, my life, just so you can avoid looking in the mirror. She said nothing, so I continued. You want help? Call a social worker. Call a credit counselor. Call the same system you said people like us were too proud to rely on. I'm not your bailout anymore. I then walked back to my office. I didn't even check to see if she was following me, but it was not the end. A week later, I received a letter. Not an email or a physical letter from the bank. The envelope was thick. The kind of thick that spells disaster. Inside, there is a marked inquiry summary. Someone apparently tried to open a business loan using my name, SSN, and the family fund's tax ID number. The only reason it didn't get through? I had closed the account a few days before, which triggered a fraud warning. The loan totaled $80,000. The company name is Vanessa Grace Recovery Services LLC. I froze. That wasn't a legitimate company. There was no LCL. There is no tax record. No license. However, the papers was submitted along with a counterfeit signature that matched mine. I phoned the bank. The fraud department representative picked up the entire packet. And as she read the co-signers, Dad and Mom, I sat there in startled silence as she said, Sir, it appears someone close to you tried to pose as your authorized financial partner. If you hadn't closed that fund, this might have gone undetected. They hadn't just utilized me, they attempted to transfer responsibility onto me. Quietly attach my name to a debt that I was not a part of. That's when everything became sharper. Vanessa suddenly desired space. My parents encouraged it. The silence. The removal. The courteous exile. It was not a spontaneous event. It was a setup. Take me off the fund discreetly. Keep my name attached. Take the money. Disappear. Allow the bank to come after me if things crumbled. They didn't only want my assistance. They wanted to hold me responsible without asking. When that didn't work, they made me the villain in a tale about their own failed theft. I spent the weekend filling out paperwork with the bank, police, and IRS. I submitted the fake paperwork. I wrote affidavits. I even handed over earlier texts in which Vanessa expressed interest in forming a nonprofit in my name. It took several hours, but each keystroke felt like treatment. Vanessa called that night from a different phone number, crying. I just wanted to say I get it now. I let her talk. She did not mention the loan. I did not mention the forgery. Just went on about how sad she was, how difficult things had been, and how we were still family. I asked one question. Did you know about the business application? There is no more sound. Then the line went dead. I blocked that number. That's when the real shift occurred. Not them, but me. I began sleeping better. I stopped checking my bank app every night, fearful that someone was stealthily siphoning my funds again. I went to supper with friends and didn't flinch when the bill arrived. Then Uncle Henry called. An outcast. They labeled him as unstable after he severed ties years ago. He found me on LinkedIn. Saw what you did, he said. Heard about the fund. Heard about the loan too. I didn't ask how. Henry always knew more than he let on. You're not the first they've drained, he said. Just the first who shut the faucet off. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't only about me. This was generational. A long line of people who were nurtured into service, silence, and becoming the savior while everyone else drowned in denial. They assumed I was the villain because I had stopped playing the hero. Allow me to tell you something about heroes. The majority of them die broke and exhausted, while everyone else applauds at their funeral. Not me. I switched cities 2 months later, new job, better team, increased pay, no forwarding address. And one day, in the solitude of my new apartment, with the floors still bare and the furniture still arriving, I received a Facebook message from Eric. Yeah. Eric. Vanessa's ex is abusive. I did not expect this. It reads, but thank you for helping her, even when she didn't deserve it. I wasn't the only thing she needed saving from. It completely stopped me. Not because I wanted affirmation, but because that was the first time anyone in that circle admitted the truth. I had been protecting them from themselves until I quit. And when I stopped, the silence that followed was not due to remorse. It was freedom. It's been nearly a year. It's been 12 months since I closed the fund. Since the group chat banishment. Since 3 a.m. A phone call resulted in 89 missed calls, 1 message, and an unexpected financial collapse. Since they submitted a business loan application under my name without my knowledge, and attempted to frame me for $80,000 in fictitious recovery services. I kept thinking about how empty I would feel after going away. That shame would creep in late at night as it used to, whispering, they're your family. Maybe you overreacted. Maybe you could have saved them. But what is the only thing I feel right now? Peace. Not the performing sort. Not the sort you pretend to have while holding back tears at Sunday dinner while someone makes a joke about you being the responsible one. Real peace. The kind when your phone does not ring with dread. Where your money belongs to you. Where your boundaries lie. Where you do not apologize for being free. They tried, of course. Mom sent an email on Christmas Eve. He stated that the tree appeared to be less full this year. I've attached a photo of her and her father in the living room, smiling without their teeth, as if performing for the camera. Vanessa sent an email on her birthday in March. A 5-paragraph essay about how she was recovering her authority, concluding with a casual mention of needing assistance with her first and last month's rent. I did not respond to either. I still check my credit score every month. That's okay. There were no unexpected accounts. There are no mysterious charges. The alerts I set up following the forgery never went off because I now control my life and defend it in the same way I once did theirs. But now comes the unexpected part. Others came forward, including cousins I hadn't seen in years, co-workers I'd hardly spoken to, and a stranger on Reddit who noticed my comment in a finance post and messaged, "Your story. I think it happened to me too." It turns out there are many of us. The strong ones. The trusty ones. They are the ones who pay the rent, mend the disarray, hide the panic, and bear the weight despite being told we are too cold. When we finally ask for anything back, the family vaults with no locks slam closed. Until one day, we discover how to slam the door. Let me be clear, leaving my family was the most difficult thing I have ever done. It's harder than watching Vanessa relapse. It's harder than removing Dad from my emergency contact list. It was harder than keeping silent while they branded me selfish, bitter, and cruel. But it was also the most important thing I'd ever done. Because staying would have entailed slowly murdering myself for their comfort. And the final straw, the one that convinced me I had done the right thing, arrived just a few weeks ago. I was walking home from a late client meeting along the same street I'd walked dozens of times before, and Aunt Evelyn was sitting outside the corner bakery. Scarf, pearls, the same smug posture. She saw me. We waved as if we were old friends. I nearly continued walking, but I paused. She eyed me up and down. "You look well," she said. "I am." There was a drumbeat. She asked without cynicism, "Would you ever consider setting something up again, for emergencies?" I laughed long, low, and from deep within my core. Then I calmly said, "I did. It's called my future." I walked away. I'm not sure if they'll ever really grasp what they lost or why I had to leave. Perhaps they will change the story. Say I was greedy, unstable, ungrateful. Perhaps Vanessa will convert a blog piece about toxic siblings into a podcast. I do not care, because the fact is straightforward. I am not the villain in their story. I am the one who has finally fled it. And in doing so, I gave myself something others could never have: unconditional freedom. Mom called me ungrateful after I sent her $36,000 over 3 years. When I said no more, she showed up screaming. What happened next was her nightmare. I'm 34 years old, have an amazing wife named Elena, and a 5-year-old son named Milo, who is my universe. I live in a mid-sized city and have a steady job as a project manager at a technology company. I am not a millionaire, but I work hard to provide a comfortable life for my family. However, this story is not about my wonderful life with Elena and Milo, but about something that greatly affected me. My relationship with my mother, Lorraine, and how everything changed in one day. Lorraine, my mother, has always been a complex woman. My father, a hard-working and quiet man, abandoned her when I was 25. I do not blame him. Lorraine was a toxic person who constantly criticized, demanded, and wanted to control everything. My father put up with everything he could, then one day he just went. He left a note stating that he couldn't handle it anymore and vanished. I never saw him again, though I occasionally worry about him and wonder whether he is okay. When my father departed, my mother was left alone with no employment, no funds, and a large amount of debt. She never had steady employment. She had always relied on my father, and when he left, she became a professional victim, wailing on the phone, claiming that the world was cruel and that everyone had abandoned her. At 25, just beginning out in my job, I couldn't leave her alone. So, like the responsible son I always was, I resolved to assist her. I began paying her bills, including the rent, energy, water, and groceries. I also provided her a monthly allowance so she could cover her personal expenses. I spent a significant lot of money on her, but I did so because, well, she was my mother. I thought it was the correct thing to do. My sister Serena, on the other hand, never raised a finger for her. Serena, 3 years younger than me, has always been my mother's favorite. Lorraine has treated her as a queen since we were little. If Serena desired something, she got it. If she got in trouble, my mother would support her no matter what. In contrast, I was always the serious one, the one who had to behave and could not fail. Serena grew up and, as expected, made some poor judgments. She traveled from party to party, living a life without purpose. She ended up as a single mother of 2 daughters, Nova and Iris, each with a different father. I never judged them. The girls are nice and this is not their fault. But Serena, rather than evolving, remained irresponsible, always looking for an easy way out. My mother, rather than establishing limits for her, adored her even more. Lorraine saw Serena as a perfect victim of circumstance, whereas I was always the one who had to understand. Despite this, I continued to pay my mother's bills for several years. Years passed in which I never asked for anything in return, not a thank you, no acknowledgement, nothing. She interpreted it as an obligation, as if I owed her something for rearing me. And while her attitude hurt me, I accepted it. I hoped that with time, she would appreciate what I did for her. I was mistaken. It was Tuesday morning, a day I'll never forget. I had an essential business trip and a meeting in a different city. It was a significant opportunity for me, a project that could result in a promotion. However, things became more complicated that day. My wife Elena had an emergency at work and was unable to be with Milo. The babysitter we usually use was unavailable, and we had no one else to turn to. For the first time in years, I considered asking my mother a favor. It was no big thing. I only needed her to monitor Milo for 3 hours until Elena returned from work. Milo is a quiet boy. He does not cause any problems. I assumed that after everything I had done for her, my mother would be willing to help me. So I called her. "Hello, Mom. How are you?" I answered, attempting to sound friendly, despite the fact that speaking to her always made me feel a knot in my gut. "Fine. What do you want?" she asked in that brusque tone she always had with me. "Look, I have a work trip today and Elena can't stay with Milo. Could you watch him for about 3 hours, just until she gets back? It's important." Silence, followed by a sardonic laugh. "Watch your son, Asher? I'm not here to watch children. I am not your slave or your servant. Get a babysitter." I was frozen. I couldn't believe what I heard. She told me this after 3 years of paying her bills and sacrificing for a roof over her head, food and electricity. I tried to remain cool. "Mom, I'm not asking you to be my slave. It's just for 3 hours. I've helped you so much. Can't you do this one favor for me?" "Don't throw what you do for me in my face," she exclaimed. "I raised you. Or have you forgotten? That's what mothers do. Don't come to me now asking for favors as if I were your employee." I was going to respond until I heard something that made me stop. In the background, I could hear children's voices, shouts, and laughter. I knew the voices immediately. Nova and Iris were Serena's daughters. My mother was looking after my sister's children, but she refused to watch my son. I felt my blood boiling. "Are those Nova and Iris?" I inquired, attempting to calm my voice. "And what if they are?" she said defiantly. "Serena asked me to watch them. She's a single mother. She needs my help." "And I don't?" I blurted out, unable to hold myself. "Mom, I've paid your bills for years and now I ask for a 3-hour favor, and you tell me no? But you'll watch Serena's daughters?" "Serena is different," she explained as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "She deserves my help. She's my favorite daughter. She always has been. You're the man you can manage on your own." I could not believe it. My mother wasn't simply rejecting me. She was telling me directly that my sister was more essential than my efforts. The argument lasted a while. I reminded her of all I'd done for her. She told me not to be ungrateful, that she raised me, and that it was my responsibility. Milo, who was sitting on the couch, began looking at me with fearful eyes. That silenced me. I hung up the phone before saying anything I would regret. I was both enraged and horribly wounded. So I took his hand and escorted him to the car before leaving. There was no babysitter available, so I had no option. I brought Milo with me for the work vacation. It was a logistical headache, but I succeeded. However, something inside of me broke that day. The next few days were a maelstrom of emotions. I was both enraged and sad. For years, I had been responsible for supporting my mother despite her dislike and her tendency to choose Serena above me. But that talk, that apparent rejection while she was watching my sister's daughters, was the final straw. I decided not to pay her expenses anymore. If Serena was her favorite daughter, she could handle it. I didn't speak with my mother for a while. Elena was very supportive of me. She had always observed how my mother handled me, but she never intervened since she understood it was a sensitive subject. "You've done more than anyone would have, Asher," she told me one night at supper. "It's time for you to think about us, about Milo, about yourself." And she was correct. The end of the month approached, and as usual, my mother called. Her tone was the same as usual, as if nothing had changed. "Asher, you know the month is coming up. I need the money for rent, utilities, groceries, and my allowance. Send me the deposit today. I'm almost out of what you gave me last month." I took a deep breath. I'd been waiting for this moment. "Mom, I'm not going to pay your bills anymore," I said as calmly as I could. "What?" she exclaimed into the phone. "What do you mean you're not going to pay? I'm your mother. It's your obligation." "No, Mom, it is not my obligation," I said. "I've been supporting you for years. And when I asked you for one favor, a simple 3-hour favor, you told me you weren't my slave. Remember? You told me to get a babysitter. Meanwhile, you were taking care of Serena's daughters. So you know what? I'm not your bank. Find someone else to support you." She was silent for a second before exploding. "You're being so dramatic. After everything I've done for you, Serena is a single mother. She needs my help. Don't overreact. Overreacting? I replied. Overreacting is me supporting you for 3 years while you can't watch my son for 3 hours. Mom, if Serena is so important, ask her to pay your bills. Let your favorite daughter take care of it. Serena doesn't have any money, she exclaimed. She's a single mother. She has responsibilities. And I have responsibilities too, Mom, I added, frustrated. I have a family, a son, and a job. I am not your ATM. I am not paying your bills anymore. Period. I hung up the telephone. My heart was racing, but I also felt a great sense of relief. For the first time in years, I had prioritized myself. Elena, who had been listening in the kitchen, hugged me. You did the right thing, she replied. That was how I felt too. I assumed that call was the last of it, but I was mistaken. The following day, someone furiously hammered on our flat door. Elena opened it, and before she could say anything, my mother rushed in, pushing her slightly. She was enraged, her eyes flashing. So you're not going to pay my bills? She exclaimed, pointing at me. Ungrateful. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Elena attempted to calm her down, but my mother disregarded her. I stood up and tried to remain calm. Mom, I'm not doing this anymore, I replied. I told you yesterday. I'm not your bank. If you want someone to support you, ask Serena. She's your favorite. Don't you make me talk about things you don't understand, she yelled. It's not her fault. You're the man. You have to help me. Then, something inside me snapped. All those years of being belittled, being second best, and carrying her duties came to light. Do you know why Dad left you, Mom? I asked, looking her directly in the eyes. Because you were toxic, because you always demanded, always criticized, always put everyone before him. And now you're doing the same thing to me. But not anymore. I am not your bank. I am not your slave. Find someone else to support you. Because I'm done. My mother dropped her mouth, as if she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. She raised her hand to slap me, but I got away in time. Get out, I instructed her, gesturing toward the door. I don't want to see you again. She continued to yell, saying she was a selfless mother, that I didn't comprehend anything, and that I was a bad kid, but I wasn't listening. Elena led her to the door, and she eventually went, but not before yelling that I would regret it. The weeks following my conversation with my mother felt like waking up from a long, grueling dream. For the first time in years, I didn't feel that constant weight on my chest, that sense of being stuck in an emotional debt I hadn't asked for. I didn't speak to Lorraine, my mother, again, and while I felt bad at first, as if I was breaking some sacred contract of being a son, that guilt vanished with time. In its stead, something new emerged, a sense of control over my life, of prioritizing my family, Elena and Milo, as well as, for the first time, myself. Elena saw the shift almost immediately. One night, as we were washing dishes after Milo had fallen asleep, she gazed at me with those eyes that always seemed to read my soul and said, "You're calmer, Asher. I haven't seen you like this in a long time." I smiled, but I wasn't sure what to say. This was true. For years, I had carried an invisible burden, the obligation of supporting my mother, tolerating her criticism, and understanding that I would always be second on her list, after Serena. But after eliminating the knot, I felt like I could breathe deeply, and my shoulders were lighter. However, the situation was not entirely tranquil. The choice to quit paying my mother's bills was not unnoticed. Every time the phone rang, I anticipated her to shout, demand, or cajole me into giving in again. But she did not call. Not at first. I think she expected me to give in, that my disobedience would be short-lived, and that I would soon return to being the obedient son I had always been. She was wrong. One day Serena called me. I was in the park with Milo, watching him pursue a ball with a smile that brightened everything around him. The phone vibrated in my pocket, and when I saw my sister's name on the screen, I was hesitant to respond. Serena and I were never close. We weren't enemies, but her manner of life, always looking for shortcuts and relying on others, forced me to keep my distance. Still, I responded. "Asher, we need to talk," she remarked without elaborating. Her voice sounded exhausted, as if she had been sobbing or arguing for several hours. "What's wrong?" I inquired, despite the fact that I was well aware of the situation. "It's Mom. She got evicted from her apartment. She didn't pay the rent, and now she's living with me. But I can't handle this, Asher. It's too much. I have Nova and Iris, and I can barely afford things for us. I don't know what to do." I was silent. I felt a pang of something. I'm not sure if it was pity for Serena or fury at the situation, but I didn't allow it to get to me. Instead, I responded with a composure I didn't realize I possessed. Serena. You are her favorite daughter. I repeated, accentuating each word. You always have been. Mom made it clear that you and your daughters are her priority, and I supported her for years, paying her rent, food, electricity, and even her allowance so she could buy everything she wanted. And you know what I got in return? Nothing. No thank you, no show of appreciation, just scorn. So if Mom is so important to you, you support her. It's not my concern. Asher, please, she said, her voice breaking slightly. It's not that easy. Mom is desperate. She has nowhere to go. I can't support her forever. Not my problem, I responded, hanging up the phone before she could respond. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't from rage. It was a combination of relief and satisfaction. For the first time, I felt like I was defending myself, my efforts, and my family. Later I discovered that Serena had kicked my mother out of her home. Lorraine appeared to have not changed at all. She remained the same, demanding, critical, and impossible to satisfy. Despite her own issues, Serena tried to help Mom, but things quickly spiraled out of control. Lorraine grumbled about everything. The food was not good enough. Serena's flat was disorganized. The girls created too much noise. She also began demanding money from Serena for personal reasons, as if Serena had any extra money. I'm not sure how to convey how I felt when I heard it. It wasn't delight, yet it wasn't pity either. It was as if a part of me still believed my mother would change, that one day she would recognize all I had done for her and finally give up. Lorraine had repeatedly chosen Serena, even when Serena couldn't offer her anything. She had belittled me, as if my efforts were useless, and now she was dealing with the consequences of her actions. My mother attempted to contact me again. I got a call from an unknown number, and when I responded I heard her voice. It was not the same powerful, demanding voice as previously. It was pleading, almost broken. Asher, please, she said. I need your help. Serena kicked me out of her house. She says I'm a burden, that she can't handle me. I have nowhere to go. I'm in a shelter, but this is no life for me. You're my son. You can't leave me like this. I closed my eyes and drew a long breath. A small part of me wanted to give up. But I remembered everything. The years spent paying her bills. Her contemptuous tone when she told me she wasn't my slave. The way she looked after Serena's daughters while refusing to help me with Milo. I remembered her evident favoritism, her incessant criticism, and how she constantly made me feel inadequate, and I realized I couldn't go back. I chuckled as I said, "There's your favorite daughter for you. You did favors for her for free, and look how she repaid you. Meanwhile, I paid your bills for years, and you threw a fit over one simple favor. You're on your own." She began to cry, but I hung up before she could say anything else. My palm shook, but not with sorrow. It felt as if with that call, I had finally locked a door that had been left open for years. Elena, who was listening on the couch, came over and hugged me without saying anything. She did not need to. She understood what that moment meant. Sometimes, while I'm with Milo in the park or making supper with Elena, I think of my mother, but not in an angry way. More with a distant sadness, like if I am remembering someone from a long time ago. I wonder whether she will ever realize what she has lost. Not just me, but Milo and Elena had the opportunity to have a family who actually loved her. But then I look at my son, who is giggling as he runs, or at my wife, who has always been there for me, and I know I made the correct decision. I'm not anyone's bank, I'm not anyone's slave. I'm Asher. A man who learned to set boundaries, value himself, and protect those who are actually important. And for the first time in a long time, I feel liberated. Subscribe to receive more daily stories. I paid $3,200 for my family's cruise. They voted me out over dinner, called me a child. But what I did next left them speechless. "You're not coming, Eli. It's for adults with real jobs." I nodded, stayed quiet, then pulled the plug on their dream cruise. The silence was beautiful. My name is Eli. I'm 29. And if there's one thing I've learned from being a part of my family, it's that they never pass up an occasion to remind you of your alleged position on the totem pole. I'm the youngest by a few years, and the only one without a spouse, a mortgage, or as they put it, a respectable LinkedIn profile. I work freelance, primarily in graphic design, with occasional copywriting assignments. It covers my apartment fee, keeps my fridge filled, and even allows me to save some money. But none of this seemed to matter to them. Not when my sister Tessa has a high-rise condo with a view of the city and my brother Brandon closes six-figure sales deals while also training for marathons. In comparison, I'm like the family dog who is tolerated, acknowledged on occasion, but never treated seriously. Sunday dinners had become more of a chore than something I looked forward to. Dad insisted on maintaining the family tie after Mom died, which evidently meant sitting in awkward silence while Tessa boasted about her newest interior design project, or Brandon ranted about corporate tax rates like he was running for government. I'd show up with a bottle of wine that no one had touched, take a few jabs, then leave with a tight smile and an even tighter chest. But this previous evening was different. We were in the middle of a meal when no one spoke to you, but your entire life was still being scrutinized. Tessa had just completed showing everyone a slideshow on her phone of possible vacation outfits. Yes, actual clothing is sorted by theme. Dad cleared his throat and said, "We all voted, and we've decided you're not coming on the cruise." I blinked. "What?" Tessa asked, drinking her wine as if she had just completed a performance. "It's adults only, for people with real jobs." I giggled gently, more out of surprise than amusement. Right? Because being 29 years old and paying his own bills does not count. Even Grandma Sweet, who was crocheting and always had peppermints in her purse, chipped in from across the table, shaking her head. "Maybe next year, dear, if you finally do something with your life." I glanced at her in surprise. This was the same woman who used to sneak cookies before supper and made me a beanie because she believed my ears were cold. She was now repeating Tessa's digs as if they were gospel. "I see," I mumbled, attempting a smile as I pushed myself from the table. "Excuse me for a moment." I stood and stepped out into the front yard, my phone in hand. It was cool outside, with the kind of fresh air that wakes you up. I paced down the porch, allowing the agony of their words to sink in deep. "In that place of your chest you try not to notice." I did not cry. I was over it. But I felt a calm, deep ache. Not only did I feel left out, but I also realized that this was nothing new. It has been this way for several years. I was an afterthought. The disappointment. They all believed the guy would eventually come crawling for help, money, or validation. Except for the cruise. I was financially involved. None of them knew, and no one had ever inquired that Tessa had contacted me in a panic. "Eli, listen. I'm booking this amazing cruise for the whole family as a surprise for Dad's birthday. It's through this luxury line and I want to lock in the group rate, but my bonus hasn't hit yet, and I need someone to float it temporarily, just a deposit. I swear I'll pay you back in 2 weeks." She seemed frantic but genuine, and against my better judgment, I agreed. I still had my receipt. I still had the confirmation email. I still had a credit card charge on my account. Because of course, Tessa never reimbursed me. Not one penny. Every time I brought it up she'd chuckle and say, "Oh, I thought you were cool with it. You did offer, right?" Technically, I did offer. But she cannot pretend it did not happen. Not for them to turn around and tell me I wasn't welcome on the very trip I had arranged. I stood beneath the porch light, staring at my screen, scrolling through old messages, rereading her happy tone, and hovering my fingers over the cancel button. One tap. That is all it would take. The reservation was still under my name. The card was still mine. I did not press it. Not yet. Instead, I returned inside, sat at the table, and remained mute while they continued to arrange their adults-only holiday. They discussed excursions in Bice, snorkeling in Cozumel, arranging spa and drink packages, and lodging upgrades. They even giggled about how relaxing it would be without any dead weight trailing along. "Don't take it personally," Brandon explained as he speared another chunk of steak. "You'll get your chance to come eventually." "Yeah," Tessa replied with a smirk. "When you level up." I smiled, nodded, and said nothing, but inside, a simmering fire was beginning to flare. By the time dessert arrived, they hadn't touched the store-bought pie I had brought, so I excused myself again, this time for genuine. I hugged Grandma. She patted my arm, as if she were comforting a kid. "Don't feel bad, honey, maybe this will be the push you need." I didn't say what I wanted to. I did not yell about hypocrisy, demand reimbursement, or throw the pie in someone's smug face. Instead, I got in my car, drove home, sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, went to the cruise website, and reviewed the reservation again. Everything was still modifiable. The entire vacation was scheduled under my name, the guests were listed as additional travelers, my card had paid for both the deposit and the upgrades. All I had to do was click once, but I haven't clicked it yet. I waited. I waited until Tessa shared a photo of matching vacation clothing for the entire family on Instagram with the remark, "1 week to paradise. Our family goals, Jar's cruise crew." I waited until Brandon texted me unexpectedly, asking if I could assist him with some last-minute travel insurance forms, as I had more time. And then I waited for the Family Cruise 2025 group chat to fill up with messages about luggage tags, airport transportation, and dinner reservations on the ship. That's when I clicked the cancel reservation button. Just like that, it only took one click to unravel everything. My phone started vibrating. Brandon first said, "Dude, the cruise confirmation disappeared." Tessa then asked, "Why is the card declined? What have you done?" Then Dad said, "Call me now." I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened the group chat, typed 2 words, "Bon voyage," and pushed send. The silence that followed was nearly musical. There's no buzz, no pings, nothing. I sat at the screen, watching the 2 words "Bon voyage" hang over a sea of stunned quiet in the family group chat. I half anticipated a volley of insults, explanations, or even an apology. But they were still trying to piece it together, trying to figure out how the person they fired could pull the rug out from under their perfect little cruise fantasy. It wasn't long until my phone exploded. Tessa was the first caller. I let it ring. Then Dad, twice in a row. I declined both. Then Brandon left a message that began calmly but gradually devolved into frustration. "Eli, what's going on? This isn't funny, dude. Call me back." I did not. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, stared at the wall, and felt the weight of it wash over me. The truth is, I didn't feel well. Not really. I did not feel like I had won or proven anything. I felt exhausted. I was tired of pretending I was fine with being regarded as the family's punchline. I'm tired of coming up, giving them the benefit of the doubt, and then watching them turn it into another joke about how I was a disappointment. But mostly, I felt liberated. It felt like I had finally pulled the plug on something that had been draining me for years. That night, I ordered Thai cuisine, put my phone on quiet, and watched an ancient sci-fi show that I hardly paid attention to. I went to bed with a full stomach and a strangely stable and hollow heart. Sleep didn't come easily, but it did eventually. There were more than 60 messages in the group chat. "Grandma, what happened with the cruise?" "Dad, that's ludicrous. Eli, you should solve this." "Tessa, you child, you're an absolute child." "Brandon, you've ruined everything." And then this one from Tessa. "I can't believe you would destroy Dad's birthday in this way. You are selfish. You've always been. If you were jealous, you could have just stated so." Jealous? That was lavish. I nearly laughed. They assumed this was about envy, that I wrecked a luxurious vacation because I wished to be them. I did not want their life. I wanted respect. If not that, I at least wanted to be away from their garbage. Still, I knew it was not over. My doorbell rang. I checked the peephole. Dad. He was dressed in his regular Sunday casual pants, polo tucked in, and sleeves pulled up, as if he was about to fix something. I debated not responding, but I didn't want to make this into a game of hide and seek. I opened the door and leaned against the frame. "Eli," he replied, frowning. "Can we talk?" I shrugged. "We're already doing it." He scratched the back of his neck, looking around as if he expected a camera crew to emerge. "Look, whatever you're upset about, can't we do this here?" I stared at him. "Where would you prefer to do it? On the cruise that I was not invited to?" He breathed forcefully. "You know that wasn't personal." "It was so intimate. It was a group decision, correct?" I replied, crossing my arms. "Just like it was a group decision not to repay me for fronting the entire cruise in the first place." He blinked. "Wait. What?" I tilted my head. "You didn't know? I thought Tessa had paid for it." I smiled. "She didn't." He stood there shocked, his expression gradually turning from uncertainty to discomfort, then to the tight-lipped rage he always felt when reality didn't fit the version he'd created in his imagination. "You paid for the cruise. And then canceled it." I nodded. "That's correct." He was quiet for a minute before saying, "You embarrassed us." That silenced me. I laughed quietly, bitterly, and honestly. "Are you embarrassed? You sat at supper and told me the family had voted me out, as if I were being banished. Grandma claimed I had done nothing with my life. My own sister called me a child, and I am the one who embarrassed you." He stared down, his jaw clenched. "I didn't cancel the cruise to make a statement," I explained. "I canceled because I realized something. If you're going to treat me like I don't belong in this family, perhaps I shouldn't be paying for the right to be excluded." He did not respond. Just gazed out toward the street, as if that would provide him with the answers. After a long period, he eventually said, "You could have handled this differently." "So could you." He nodded carefully before turning and walking down the steps. I did not welcome him back. I did not apologize. I didn't inquire if he still intended to go somewhere for his birthday. I simply closed the door, went back inside, and sat down. The group discussion became quiet. There are no new messages, threats, or guilt trips, only silence. Until a new message appeared from Tessa. No apologies. There's no explanation. Just a screenshot of the rebooking confirmation. But this time, there was no mention of me. No bon voyage. Just saying, "We're going anyway." I stared at the screenshot for an entire minute before processing it. They had rebooked the cruise. Not rescheduled. Not regrouped. Just moved on. The same journey. Same week. Same smug demeanor. There was only one thing missing. Me. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody addressed the money. Nobody apologized. Tessa's message hung there as a challenge. "We're going regardless." I didn't respond. I didn't want to give her any satisfaction. But deep down, I knew what this was. Damage control. They were scrambling to protect the picture and keep up appearances. Probably spent twice as much for last-minute bookings and substandard cabins. But they didn't care. The priority was not comfort. It was managed. And making certain I was out of the picture. Brandon texted me privately shortly after. "I disagree with how they handled it. But you really blindsided everyone, man." I rolled my eyes. Did I? Or did I simply cease being quiet? He did not respond. The cruise was slated to depart soon. My sister's Instagram feed featured daily countdowns to swimwear, sunscreen hauls, and spa appointment screenshots. The hashtag CruiseCrew 2025 was back in full swing, only now it appeared thinner, more strained. I'd muted the majority of them by now, but occasionally something would slip through, a tag, a story, a photo from grandma with too much zoom, and the caption scrawled out in all caps, "See you at sea." I had to laugh. Not because it was hilarious, but because the entire situation had become preposterous. Here was this group of people clinging to the idea of unity they were so keen to maintain, while I sat in a one-bedroom apartment with a stack of freelance edits, a leftover burrito, and the unmistakable sense that I was better off not going. Even yet, it hurts to be overlooked and unwelcome. The thing they never understood, or even attempted to understand, was that I did not require luxury. I didn't require first-class, five-star dinners, or sunset views from my balcony suite. I simply wanted to feel like I belonged. To feel like I was as important as the people I grew up with. And every time I gave them the opportunity to prove it, they doubled down on their denial. I was done trying to fix it. I received one more communication from Dad. "Your sister says you still have a refund credit from the original booking. Can you make a transfer to her card?" No welcome, no question. Just a request. As if I were an office clerk sorting receipts. I stared at the message. Then I opened my banking app to check. Sure enough, there was a $740 trip credit. I thought about it. I considered all the groceries I could buy with that. I considered using it to pay rent, or to buy a plane ticket to somewhere I wanted to go. And then I wondered what they'd think if I returned it. That I was folding, that I was still playing the role they had scripted for me. So I redeemed the credit for myself. I reserved a 3-night cabin in the Highlands. Nothing fancy. A little Airbnb with a wood stove, a tree-lined view, and a nearby hiking route. There's no mobile service, no signal. Just enough room to think, breathe, and be myself. Free of the clamor of others attempting to shrink me. As I packed, I watched the images from their voyage arrive. Tessa was on the pier wearing a sun hat that still had the price tag on it. Brandon held up a margarita larger than his head. Grandma stood under a bon voyage flag, beaming, and Dad appeared exhausted. Not physically, but something in his gaze suggested that the fractures were beginning to appear. I smiled as I zipped up my duffel bag and turned off my phone. They had no idea where I was headed. For the first time in a long time, neither had I. I left the city just as the sun was rising and the cruise liner was most likely embarking. No goodbyes, no phone calls, and no texts. I turned off my phone and placed it into the glove compartment, as if it didn't exist. The drive to the cabin was long. Winding highways gave way to tiny country roads lined with pine trees and the occasional gas station that appeared to have been unchanged since the 1980s. By the time I arrived, the sky was a deep, pure blue, and the air smelled of firewood and cold soil. The cabin was charmingly rustic, silent, And, more importantly, utterly detached. There's no Wi-Fi. No signal. Only a landline for emergencies and a notebook left by the owner, loaded with handwritten notes about local trails, restaurants, and how to restart the water heater if it flickered. I started a fire in the stove, unpacked my groceries, and sat on the deck with a cup of coffee, watching the trees dance in the breeze. That first night, I enjoyed the best sleep I had in months. It's difficult to explain, but something within me began to loosen. I was not simply taking a break from my family. I was detoxing from years of unspoken expectations, backhanded remarks, and courteous tolerance. For the first time, I was not performing. I wasn't changing my posture or tone, or pretending I wasn't aware when someone rolled their eyes at me. I was not seeking to be included. I was not trying at all. I was just living. I followed a trail behind the property to a ledge that overlooks a frozen lake. The vista was spectacular, and I sat on a boulder for more than an hour, watching the sunshine reflect off the cold surface below. I didn't think about the crews. I didn't wonder what they were doing. I didn't anticipate their dinner reservations, their phony laughs, or the awkward, tension-filled breakfast that would undoubtedly ensue once the novelty wore off. I just breathed. I eventually switched the phone back on. It buzzed for over 3 full minutes. Voicemails, missed calls, texts, and most importantly, photographs. There are hundreds of images from the voyage. The majority of them came from Tessa, who had obviously taken it upon herself to document every hour of the journey. There she was, relaxing by the pool. Brandon was flexing next to a fruit plate. Dad sat on a deck chair, drink in hand, looking stiff and awkward, as if he despised every moment of it. Grandma is sporting a Captain of Sass visor. Then the tone altered. The final few photographs were hazy. A photo of Brandon and Tessa arguing. Another image shows Dad sitting alone at a dining table, his glass of wine untouched. One of Grandma sleeping on a chair, lips slightly open, phone in hand, as if she had fallen asleep in the middle of a text. No captions, no hashtags, no emojis. Then followed the messages. Tessa. Thank you for ruining everything. Tessa. Eli. The vacation was a disaster. Brandon. I wish you were here. Not joking. It was strange without you. Grandma. Call me when you return, dear. And then Dad. His message arrived after I had already started packing to go. I've been thinking about what you mentioned. You were correct. We were mistaken. And I apologize. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't need it at the moment, but it was the first time my father had said those words to me in years. The man who prided himself on being stable, logical, and never admitting mistakes had finally said it. I apologize. I drove home. The return felt different. The city didn't seem so oppressive. My flat did not feel so little. My existence, as faulty and unpredictable as it was, seemed personal. And for the first time, that was sufficient. There are no Sunday dinner invitations. No new group conversations. Just silent. Until one day, I received a letter in the mail from Grandma. It was handwritten on floral stationery with a faint lavender scent. Inside was a brief note. Dear Eli, we missed you. Truly. That day I allowed my mouth to escape me. I was wrong to say what I said. I apologize, and I hope you can forgive me. P.S. The cruise was terrible. The shrimp gave me hives, and Tessa sobbed 3 times. Never again. Love a Grandma. I laughed so hard I almost cried. Then I wrote her back. This is only a short letter. I told her I had forgiven her, told her about the cabin. I included a Polaroid of the frozen lake and urged her to come visit whenever she wanted some peace and quiet. Brandon texted me a few days later, asking if I wanted to meet for lunch. Not a group activity. It's just the 2 of us. I said yes. The lunch was relaxed, with 2 brothers catching up. He spoke about work. I mentioned a new freelancing gig I'd taken on. Then, as we were wrapping up, he said, You know, I think Tessa's more upset that she couldn't control the narrative than about the cruise itself. I nodded. That sounds about right. She'll come around, he continued. I smiled. She doesn't need to. And I intended it. The truth is that people like Tessa will only cooperate if it benefits them. And I was not going to spend the rest of my life waiting for her approval. Not anymore. Summer arrived. I reserved another cabin stay, this time longer. I began putting more effort into my freelance business. I got a couple new clients, created a decent portfolio website. I even began teaching an online design course a couple of nights a week. It was good to devote energy to something that gave back. Then unexpectedly, Dad called. What about dinner tonight? he asked. I paused. Only you? He cleared his throat. Just me. I agreed. We met at a little Italian restaurant near his flat. Not a large family supper. There's no long table. No curated performance. Just a father and kid eating pasta and sharing a bottle of red. He revealed a few things I never expected to hear. He regretted making me feel like the odd one out. He had miscalculated how difficult it was to construct a life on your own terms, and he missed Mom more than he let on. And sometimes, in the midst of holding everything together, he forgot to notice individuals. Especially me. We didn't hug. That was not his style. But when we said our goodbyes, he placed his hand on my shoulder and whispered, "You've grown into someone I'm proud of." That was enough. Not a huge gesture, not a perfect conclusion. However, this is only the beginning. Since then, we have created something new. Not showy. Not too loud. But real. Every now and then, Grandma sends me a card with a fresh knitted cap or a joke that makes no sense. Brandon and I occasionally drink beers. Even Tessa hasn't changed much, but I've changed enough that her barbs no longer sting. I quit chasing their approval. And the irony? That's when they began offering it. But by that point, I didn't need it. I'd already returned something more valuable than a cruise or a place at their table. My sister built a brand on neurodiversity. Then she erased me, the autistic daughter from the family, so I spoke out, and the internet listened. Being deleted isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's so silent that it nearly seems courteous. We were standing in my folks' dining room. Everyone had been hurried indoors for the big reveal. My brother described it as if we were about to see a new automobile or gender. It was a mural, a hand-painted family tree that filled the full wall. The kids gave me a financial gift, but not a creative one. They did not want my feedback. "We've got it covered," my sister replied. "Just chip in your third." So I chipped, like I always do. The curtain fell with a little flourish, and the audience gasped. My father laughed. My mother wiped a tear. My sister virtually bowed. People applauded because that is what happens when you are informed you are experiencing something significant. And it was impressive. I will give them that. The tree was huge with sweeping limbs, exquisite calligraphy, and gold embellishments. It had names. So many names. Cousins, second cousins, in-laws, and babies. Even the family dog left a paw print. I recognized the majority of them, not because we were close, but because I have a great memory. It comes in useful when your personality needs to be studied, rehearsed, and continually re-edited in order to be tolerated. I smiled and clapped along. There are no red flags yet. I walked closer, inspecting the branches with confused fascination. I found my older sister immediately away. Large, bold text, along with photographs of her twins and spouse. My younger brother's name appeared on the other side, beneath a proud little scroll that read, "Regional Sales Manager." He sells appliances. You would think he invented electricity. Next, I looked for my own name. It was not there. Don't panic. It was a large tree. Perhaps I was nestled lower down. Perhaps the artist used my complete legal name rather than my nickname. I scanned again, this time slowly, from left to right and bottom to tip. Still nothing. I examined the spouse clusters just in case. Nope. I'm not married, but neither is my cousin Emily, who received her own leaf, complete with a miniature watercolor of her rescue cat. I examined every name, all 112 of them. Except for me, everyone else in the room was on that wall. For a while I wondered if I had merely gone temporarily blind, was dreaming, or both. I stared at the painting intently, as if I could squint myself into reality. Nothing. The first emotion I felt wasn't fury or grief, it was embarrassing. That creeping heat under your skin that makes you feel both invisible and exposed, as if your zipper was unzipped and someone was live streaming it. I did not cry. I didn't ask any questions. I strolled quietly into the bathroom and locked the door. It was not about the need for privacy. I only needed a few undisturbed minutes to believe what had actually occurred. I sat on the closed toilet, glanced at the floor tiles, and allowed my brain to do what it does best, sort information. The facts were simple. I helped pay for a mural. A mural featuring nearly 100 people. My siblings and parents approved the mural, and no one thought to include me in the planning process, which lasted weeks, if not months. Or they considered it but decided not to. That was the aspect that struck me. The intentionality of it. It was not an oversight. Oversights can't withstand 4 drafts, a deposit, and a wall. After a while, I realized I had been sitting there for over half an hour. Nobody had knocked. Nobody had texted. Nobody had even noticed I was gone. I poured water on my face, gently dried it, reapplied lip balm, and adjusted my hair. When I re-entered the dining room, the mural remained the focal point. People were taking selfies in front of it now, pointing at their names as if they had won something. My mother was near the drinks table. I walked over, smiling as if nothing had occurred. "Hey," I said nonchalantly. She became cheery. "Yes, sweetie. Don't you think something's missing from the mural?" She appeared bewildered. "Missing someone," I responded, still smiling. "Who?" "Me." Her expression changed only slightly, a blink and a half-second pause. "Oh, that," she replied, smoothing a stack of napkins. "Well, we just didn't think you'd want to be on it. You know, you're not really into this sort of thing." "Legacy," I answered. "You know what I mean." My father snorted from behind her. "We figured you'd call it sentimental nonsense and roll your eyes." I nodded only once, and that was it. They knew. They had seen the final edition. They'd approved it, and they were fine with it. Comfortable even. So I said nothing more. I just turned, walked to the front door, and left. Nobody stopped me. Nobody followed. I got into my car, started it, and drove. Not at home. Not yet. I had things to do. Quiet things, meticulous ones, and a very well-organized folder that I hadn't opened in a long time. I didn't say anything that night. But 3 days later, they'd see my name somewhere unexpected, and this time, they would be unable to remove it. I am autistic. I didn't always know what the phrase meant, but I knew I wasn't wanted. I used to think of myself as a broken appliance. I appeared normal from the outside, but something inside didn't work properly. I wasn't sure what portion it was, but it kept making people stare at me like I'd said the wrong thing, laugh when I wasn't joking, or grow silent as if I'd ruined something unseen. So I spent most of my childhood pretending I wasn't autistic, long before I realized the term existed. My entire youth was essentially one extended experiment in how to pass as someone who belonged. I grew up in a large extended family of loud, bustling, performative individuals who enjoyed surprise parties, family activities, and group singing. All of these were things I secretly dreaded but tried hard not to show. We had relatives like most people have houseplants, too many to list, all crammed into one room. It should have felt like a community. It did not. From the age of 5, I knew I was different in the wrong way, and the message was loudest from inside my own home. One of my earliest memories was telling my aunt that her new haircut was uneven. I believed I was being helpful. She had asked what I thought, and I responded directly, as I had been trained. I didn't think much of it until my mother took me aside and told me I was impolite, embarrassing, and ungrateful. My father then chimed in, saying that I needed to learn tact, or I would never have friends. I was grounded for 2 weeks due to a haircut. Everyone chuckled when my brother informed the same aunt 6 months later that she resembled a pink sheepdog. That was the topic. My siblings, Jake and Elise, were the golden children. Social, outspoken, and always on. Elise, in instance, could say or do almost anything and be perceived as charming. When I duplicated her precise language in a group conversation, I received a strange look and was told I was trying too hard, which I was, but not in the way they expected. I was trying to figure out how to be with them without being corrected, ridiculed, or ignored. Jake used to bark at me like a dog whenever I entered a room, just to see if I flinched. Elise would imitate my voice in a high-pitched whine, saying things like, "Technically, it's not accurate to say that." Since I used to correct them when they said things that were false. You know, like a normal kid who cared about facts. My parents witnessed it. They also laughed. "You have to admit, Joanna, you do sound like that." I never heard, "Hey, stop mocking your sister." So I decided to try to fix myself. I didn't do it to improve my networking skills or because I enjoyed reading. I did it out of desperation. I had bookcases full of books on communication, social skills, and body language. Titles include How to Talk to Anyone and Social Rules for Children. I did not read them like novels. I examined them as though I were preparing for an examination. Eye contact for 3 seconds, then glance away. When welcoming someone, make sure to smile. Nod sometimes. Ask questions. Do not talk too much. Do not interrupt. Do not correct. I rehearsed in front of the mirror. I recorded myself to see whether I sounded weird. I observed others and collected mental notes, and yet, at every family event, I was the one off to the side. Too silent, too intense, and not entertaining enough. I'd sit at the kids' table until I was 16 because no one made room for me at the adults' table, and no one invited me to participate in anything else. When I tried, when I smiled, joined conversations, and adopted the appropriate tone, they'd say, "Why are you acting like that?" I was stuck. If I were myself, I'd be a problem. If I masked, I looked strange. Regardless, I lost. In school I excelled. Not socially, but academically. Science makes sense. Programming makes sense. Cells, logic, and algorithms did not mind if I created the wrong face. They just worked or didn't. I received a full ride to university for biology and computer science. I completed my PhD, began lecturing part-time, and worked in research. I now earn more money than anyone else in my family, but no one mentions it, except when it's time to prepare a large family gift. Then it's, "Can you chip in a little more? You're doing so well." And I always did, hoping that this time it would count. I began to suspect I might be autistic when I was 25. I was browsing a site about social burnout in women when I came across posts that made me feel like someone had hijacked my inner monologue. Women discuss masking, never feeling natural, needing to learn how to socialize, and being fatigued after a birthday celebration. I did not feel seen. I felt called out. So I explored deeper, reading papers, articles, personal essays, and completing 3 online examinations. I received an exceptional score. I didn't want to assume anything. So I contacted a professional, underwent a thorough assessment, sat through hours of questions and evaluations, and eventually received what I already knew: a formal diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. I told my relatives. I sat them down, or tried to. My mother kept getting up to refresh her tea. When I eventually said it, she chuckled. "You're not autistic, Joanna, don't be silly, you just don't like parties." My father told me, "You're too smart to be autistic." Jake responded, "Oh, so now we're supposed to walk on eggshells around you?" Elise simply grinned and commented, "You've always liked labels." This is the same sister who built a company on neurodivergent inclusivity, featured neurodivergent models in her advertisements, discussed representation in interviews, and then commissioned a mural with 112 names, but left mine off. They did not forget me. They did not overlook me. They erased me. And if I hadn't walked into that room and seen at that wall with my own eyes, I may have gone another decade thinking that if I just tried harder, repaired myself a little more, they'd let me in. But I now see they never wanted me to, and I am done trying to earn it. I did not yell. I did not demand answers. I did not call anyone to express how badly they had hurt me. I just stopped responding. There's no dramatic group chat exit, no final word. I muted the family thread, archived the messages, and disabled read receipts. Then I unplugged from the machine I had been using my entire life. The first item I cut was money. Not all at once. I was not trying to make a point. I was just finished. I discontinued the automated transfer that paid a portion of my parents' property taxes, one they never acknowledged but clearly relied on. I removed my contribution to our shared family activities fund, which began as a joint effort, but gradually became, "Joanna covers what we forgot." I denied Elise's Venmo request for the floral arrangements she had already ordered on our behalf. I stopped paying for those who did not believe I belonged to them. Nobody noticed for the first week. I watched quietly while the group conversation buzzed with filtered party photos and post-event compliments. Then someone mentioned the missing birthday deposit for our cousin Lily's daughter. Jake responded, "Did anyone cover Joanna's part?" It bounced. Elise replied, "Pretty sure she just forgot. Can one of you follow up with her? She might be overwhelmed again." Overwhelmed. It was their favorite word for me. Not autistic, excluded, or betrayed. Only overwhelmed. As if I'd tripped over my own shadow again. A few days later, Elise left me a voice message. I listened to it once, then again, to be sure I hadn't imagined the tone. "Hey, so I know things have been a little weird, but I just wanted to check in. We really missed you after the party, and I know you've been sensitive lately, but you know we love you, right? Like obviously you're important to the family. Anyway, let me know if you're okay. Also, if you could send your third for Lily's gift today, that would be amazing. No pressure." I did not respond. The next morning, I received a forwarded invoice and a passive-aggressive "just circling back" email from Elise's assistant. I removed it. Then began the guilt parade. My mother left a voicemail in which she clearly tried to seem calm but utilized her sing-song panic voice when everything were breaking apart. "Joanna, sweetheart, I don't know what's going on, but this isn't like you. You've always been so generous and dependable. I know the mural was complicated, but we were just trying to do something special. We didn't mean to upset you. Please don't let this ruin the whole family dynamic." The overall family dynamic. That is what she termed it. Not what they did, but my attitude to it. They didn't receive it since they did not want to. They painted me out and laughed in my face when I mentioned it. And now they were perplexed. I didn't want to continue being their silent benefactor. I was not angry, not anymore. I just wasn't available. I had energy again. The type that comes when you quit giving your worth to those who simply see you as a resource. At roughly the same time, I received an email from a conference organizer. A keynote speaker had unexpectedly withdrawn from a neurodivergence and mental health event. Someone had noticed a blog article I wrote a few months ago on how autistic women are often misrepresented in academia. They asked if I was willing to talk. At first I considered deleting it. I am not a public speaker by nature. But then I thought, perhaps that's the idea. So, I said sure. I spent a week writing the talk. I'm not rehearsing it, just writing it honestly. I started with a story about a girl who always brought extra cupcakes to parties. I paid for my pizza. I took on the extra responsibility. I took over the planning. Always helpful. Always just outside the circle. I informed them that she had read 13 books on social skills before the age of 12, thinking they would educate her how to quit making people uncomfortable. I told them how she earned a PhD, acquired a house, gave freely, smiled sweetly, and never made a fuss, just chipped in again and again, quietly, dependably, invisibly. Until one day, she helped pay for a mural and a family tree. It contained 112 names. Hers was not one of them. The talk was live-streamed. I didn't think much about it. I went home, prepared tea, and evaluated papers. But by dawn, the video had received over 60,000 views. People captioned it with phrases such, "This hit harder than I expected," and "The cruelty of quiet exclusion. You can't call yourself inclusive if you erase your own sibling." The comments began pouring in. Some came from strangers, some were not. Someone wrote, "Isn't this about that fashion designer who always posts about neurodivergence?" Another responded, "Didn't her sister pay for that mural too?" I remember the photos. I didn't say anything, but I didn't need to. And then, an unexpected event occurred. They sued me. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. Not because I didn't know who I was dealing with. I knew. I really hoped they wouldn't be so ignorant, petty, or delusional. But no, they were just that. The envelope arrived via courier. A man in a suit brought it to me, as if I were being served in a drama. I was half expecting him to say, "You've been warned." Inside is a lawsuit filed by my sister's company for reputational harm. So here I am. Because I said the truth. It went viral because it appears that publicly rejecting your autistic sister is acceptable, until the public notices. Her brand had already started bleeding by that point. It began with a few quiet online comments. Then people started sharing video from the conference, including my address, with remarks like, "She paid for the mural, her name wasn't even on it." It's funny how some inclusive brands only include those who make them look good. 112 names, not hers. People posed questions. And when you've built your entire business on the concept of diversity, questions like that are poison. Partnerships became silent. A model backed out. An influencer canceled a project and shared a cryptic story that everyone knew was about Elise. Suddenly, the sister who had always professed to support neurodivergence was asked why she couldn't even stand next to it. So she chose to sue me for crafting a deceptive narrative, implied defamation, and arranging a targeted reputational attack. She also tossed in emotional turmoil, which I thought was beautiful. I mean, am I coordinating a reputational attack? Please, I can hardly organize a spice rack without taking breaks. I hired a decent lawyer. "Did you name her in the talk?" she inquired. "Nope." "Did you identify her?" "Business?" "Number?" "Did you lie about anything?" "Number." She smiled. "So let's have some fun. We built a case with care. I gave her the bank transfer that confirmed I had paid for 1/3 of the mural. Screenshots from the group chat, where I was informed, "We've got it covered," and never consulted again. A digital guest list of 112 persons. Everyone on the wall except me. A high-resolution photo of the mural, with names named, is celebrated. Finally, Elise's assistant sent me an email. "We left Joanna off. Elise thought it would be simpler. Cutting off a tumor is simpler." The trial didn't last long. Elise arrived appearing as if she were auditioning for the role of wronged woman, corporate edition. Beige power suit, no makeup, and no eye contact. My parents sat behind her, both sporting the, "We don't understand what's going on, but we support our daughter" expression. It felt strange to see them in the courtroom. They did not appear to be comfortable. Perhaps there were regulations there. Or the repercussions. My lawyer requested me to go him through the story. So I did. I described how I'd contributed monetarily, how I wasn't involved in the planning, how I wasn't on the tree, and how my sister developed a business around the identity she removed from her own family. I spoke clearly and quietly. I had practiced. I did not look at Elise. I did not need to. The mural photo appeared on a screen. The judge squinted. "Whose Biscuit?" "Our family dog," I explained. "Deceased?" "Yes. Died in 2020. The judge stared back at me. "But included?" "Yes." He looked down at his notes and then back at the image. "Your name isn't there." "No," I responded. "It's not." I could feel the air shifting in the room. There is something about seeing it printed, not figurative, overblown or emotional, just facts. A wall with 112 names. Mine is missing. The tree was built by a deceased dog. I did not. Elise's lawyer attempted to argue that the artwork was symbolic and not intended to represent all members of the family. So my lawyer zoomed in on the branches, showing the nicknames, marriage dates, infants, and even the gold-foiled small acorn beneath Jake's name with the words, "First to own a home" underneath. "Symbolic?" she inquired. "Or selectively thorough?" The jurors did not require much more. The case was dropped, and Elise was forced to pay all legal fees. When the decision was handed down, she did not glance at me. My mother did. Her expression was not angry. I was not ashamed either. It was flat, like someone watching a machine they didn't know how to use. She seemed to want to hit a button to rewind it. However, there was no button. There was no videotape. It was just now. After that, things quickly unraveled. Her company lost 2 major investors. Then a lawsuit emerged from a former employee, a neurodivergent model who claimed she was abused and underpaid. Elise posted a long pastel background apology about listening and learning, which was ratioed within an hour. Her brand went out of business within 6 months. Within another 3 months, my parents secretly sold their home. I wasn't the only cause, but I was the missing link in a system that only functioned when I was too tired to refuse. They scaled back. I moved into a modest condo outside of the city. My brother helped a little. Elise did not. I found out from an email chain that I was not supposed to be copied on. Their new address was given at the bottom, alongside a remark about who was bringing potato salad to Thanksgiving. I was not invited, but I did not want to go. Something unusual happened following all of this. I expected to feel triumphant. I did not. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel as if I was clutching to the edge of a family, attempting to achieve a position that did not exist. I didn't feel like I was preparing for another rejection. I wasn't shrinking to be more likable. I wasn't checking to see who was watching. I was just me. Free and unapologetic. Oh, I met someone too. He's a biochemist who despises casual conversation and enjoys preserved sea animals. He does not flinch when I speak exactly what I mean. Don't call me chilly since I don't fake a smile. Do not try to fix me while I'm overwhelmed. Simply ask, do you want solitude or company? Sometimes we sit in complete stillness for hours. It's the loudest peace I've ever experienced. I used to believe that if I just did everything right, if I was kind enough, helpful enough, and polished enough, my family would notice me. But now I don't need to be seen by those who only saw me when I was useful. I see myself. And that's it. It has been a few years now. I went to real treatment. Not the kind where someone tries to change your behavior, but the kind where you can actually ask, who am I if I'm not performing for survival? Unmasking was not a switch. It was a slow, unusual, and uncomfortable procedure. Imagine pulling off a costume you didn't realize you were wearing and finding you've never gazed in the mirror before. There were days when I missed the mask, keep things consistent, maintain people's comfort levels. But now I don't live there. Sometimes I still need to apply it sparingly, like emotional sunscreen. But most of the time, I can be myself. Fully. Honestly. Without apologies. I'm also engaged now. He sees me, not the polished or edited version. He kisses me, and he enjoys that version. That is still a little wild to say aloud. I have not spoken with my family since the lawsuit, and I don't intend to. I used to believe I couldn't thrive without their approval. It turns out that I was barely surviving with it. I'm happy now. Not because everything is great, but because I am no longer fighting to prove my right to exist. So I do wonder occasionally. Did I do the correct thing? Have I gone too far? Or did I finally get far enough? Please let me know in the comments. Family ghosted me on Thanksgiving. I cooked for 12 hours. Anyway, 6 months later, my son came back alone. So I gave him a binder that ended it all. I'm a 63-year-old woman living alone in the house where I raised my son. It's a peaceful neighborhood located outside of Dayton, Ohio. My husband went away 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer took him quickly. We were debating over what to watch on television for 1 minute. The next thing we knew, we were sitting in a doctor's office, being informed he only had months to live. He made 3. After he died, my world became smaller. My kid, Caleb, was the only connection that still seemed alive. He was always a good child. Not perfect, but good. He would call at least once every week. We'd have lunch when he got into town. I clung to it, perhaps more than I should have. Then he met Sierra. She worked in technology, something far and difficult. She was sharp. I will not lie. The initial impression was impressive. Confidence, well-spoken, polite but distant. Over time I knew it wasn't just nerves. That is how she was. Everything carried a tone. Each conversation with her felt like a job interview. It felt as if she was always assessing me and waiting for me to say something inappropriate. The first significant crack appeared around Christmas a couple years ago. I made a large meal. Sierra strolled in, glanced over the table and inquired, "Is the stuffing meat-based?" No hello. No smile. "This is just a checklist." I said yes. She did not touch it. I barely touched anything. She brought her own meals in Tupperware. She phoned ahead the next year. I was told that if I wanted them to come, I needed to agree not to make anything with a face. No turkey, no ham, and no eggs. I didn't understand, but I said okay. I prepared a meatless dinner. It wasn't perfect, but I tried. I even baked her a vegan chocolate pie. She took one bite and commented, "Did you use canned coconut milk? That brand contains guar gum, which is bad for digestion." That ached, but I let it go because I wanted to see my son. That was the part I kept holding on to. Then they had a baby. I cried when Caleb informed me they were expecting. I hadn't sobbed for years. I went up into the attic and took down the ancient crib my husband had built. Jack made it by hand. We sanded every inch. I painted it light blue. It held our son for 3 years. I polished it. I fixed the screws, purchased a new mattress. I discovered all of Caleb's old toys, wood blocks and plush animals. I washed each one, photographed them, and mailed them. To Sierra. Her response: "We appreciate the thought, but we're avoiding gendered toys and vintage materials that might be unsafe. Please don't hold on to anything for us." Just like that. No thanks. There's no kindness. I still have them. I stored them in the guest room. Deep down, I hoped she would alter her mind. Then came Thanksgiving. I called Caleb a week prior. I asked if they were coming. I told him I would make whatever they liked. Anything. I simply wanted to see them. He said he'd talk with Sierra and get back to me. 2 days later, I received a text from her, not him. "We've decided to have our own celebration this year with people who understand where we're at in life. We don't eat with people who can't evolve." That one sentence clarified everything. It didn't involve food, toys, or ingredients. It was about me. She believed I was less. Old. Outdated. Ignorant. Useless. I didn't weep immediately. I was just standing in the kitchen with my phone in hand. I stared at the stove, the fridge, and the wall where my husband used to lean when I cooked. I cooked anyhow. Out of habit. Out of hope. I roasted the turkey, made the stuffing, sweet potatoes with micro marshmallows, and green bean casserole, the same recipes I had been cooking since 1987. I also remade the dry vegan loaf just in case. But no one arrived. I sat at the head of the table. One plate. There's no music. There's no conversation. Just the ticking of an ancient wall clock. Following supper, I scrubbed the dishes. I didn't eat dessert. That night, something inside of me cracked. I entered the guest room and turned on the light. I gazed at the cot, the toys, the baby books, and the small socks I had purchased from the second-hand shop. I took up one of Caleb's old teddy bears and simply stared at it. It seemed like grief, but not to my spouse this time. It was for the family I believed I still had. At 1 a.m., I was unable to sleep. I loaded the cot, high chair, toys, blankets, and books into my van. It required 4 trips. I did not even cry while doing it. I was numb. The next morning, I drove everything downtown. There is a women's refuge near the bus station. I told the woman the truth. I saved all this for my grandchild, but they don't want it. Maybe someone here will. She grabbed my hand and squeezed it. She said nothing, just nodded. It was the nicest thing I'd felt in a long time. A week passed. By silence. Then Caleb called. "Hey, Mom." His voice was tense, as if he was attempting to be nonchalant but falling short. "Sierra and I were thinking of coming down this weekend, so you can meet the baby." I did not respond right away. I waited till I could communicate clearly. "Why now?" He paused. "I guess we just realized family matters." I stood in the hallway, staring at the portrait of him as a little boy. "There's nothing here for your baby anymore," I explained. "You made your choice. I've made mine." There was a prolonged hush. Then, the line clicked. He had hung up. That was 6 months ago. I have not seen them since. 3 weeks ago, Caleb arrived at my door by himself. What he told me altered everything. Caleb arrived on a Saturday morning. There was no warning, no text, simply his car driving into the driveway as it did when he was in college. I was sitting in the living room, folding laundry. I peeked out the window and watched him exit the car alone. No baby carrier, no Sierra. He looked different, tired. Not just the new parent is fatigued, tired and worn down. His face was paler. His eyes are hollow. His shoulders dropped when he noticed me at the door. I didn't open it immediately. I just stood there waiting and watching. He raised his hand to knock, but stopped when I opened the door. "Hi, Mom," he said. I didn't respond. I merely stood aside. He took it as a yes. He walked in slowly, as if the floor would collapse beneath him. I sat down on the couch without being asked. I remained standing. "Lastly," I stated, "why are you here?" He did not glance at me. His gaze remained fixated on the old coffee table, the one with the scratch he made when he was 7. "I'm sorry," he replied. Quiet. "I'm really sorry." I still waited. "She left," he said. My heart didn't race. My stomach did not flip. I felt nothing at first, just feeling numb again. "When?" I asked. 2 months ago. He claimed she took the baby. She said she wanted some space. They said I wasn't supportive enough. She's currently in Seattle with her sister. I swallowed hard and he looked up at me. His eyes were crimson. "I haven't seen my daughter in 8 weeks. She won't let me FaceTime her. Won't send pictures. She says I'm emotionally unstable and too tied to regressive influences. That means you, Mom." I did not say anything. I just sat across from him. "I didn't defend you," he said, his voice shaking. "I let her push you out. Every time you tried to help or reach out, I let her shut it down. I told myself it was easier to keep peace with her than to stand up for you. I was weak." He ran 2 hands through his hair. "I thought I was being a good husband. I thought compromising meant keeping things smooth. But I gave up too much. I let her cut you out. And then she cut me out too." I leaned forward carefully. "Why are you really here, Caleb?" He caught my gaze, and for the first time in years, I recognized my son, not the guy she'd molded him into. "I need your help," he said. He retrieved a folder from his bag. Legal documents, custody forms, SMS, and emails. "She's filing for sole custody. Claims I'm not safe, that I let toxic people near the baby." He paused. "She named you in the documents. Said you tried to give her outdated, dangerous items, and that I exposed our child to a woman resistant to growth and modern parenting values." I looked at the folder and then at him. "I've already met with a lawyer," he stated. "But the judge is leaning her way. She has money, her family's helping her. I'm not asking you to take sides. I know it's a lot. I need someone who remembers who I was, who can tell the court I'm not what she says I am." I leaned back and folded my arms. "And why would I do that?" I inquired. "Why should I fight for a man who left me out of his life, who stood by while his wife made me feel like trash?" His eyes flooded with tears. But he did not beg. He only nodded slowly. "You're right," he replied. "I don't deserve your help. And for a long time, neither of us said anything. But then I noticed something. Something he could not fake. Shame. It's a real shame. I got up and walked into the guest room. I hadn't gone in there since the night I handed everything away. I opened the closet. One item had been left behind. A tiny book titled, "Guess How Much I Love You." I intended to put it in the donation bin, but it somehow slipped between the shelves. I brought it back into the living room and placed it on the table in front of him. "Start by reading this to her," I told her, "even if she can't hear you right now." When he looked down at the book, he began to cry. I did not hug him. Not yet. But I did not ask him to go either. That was 3 weeks ago. Sierra's sister recently shared a photo on Instagram. A photo that altered everything. And gave me a notion for a revenge I never dreamed I'd carry out. Sierra's sister posted the photo on Instagram. I don't follow her, but a neighbor's daughter, who is still in touch with Caleb, noticed it and forwarded it to me. It featured Sierra enjoying an outside breakfast, smiling broadly and clutching a mimosa. Her daughter, my granddaughter, was seated on the lap of another mother. That part did not hit me right immediately. I was too concentrated on Sierra's expression, as if she were impenetrable and the entire universe had conformed to her way of doing things. But then I looked more closely. The woman holding the infant was not her sister. I zoomed in. She was in her late 30s and held my granddaughter as if she were her own. She wore a gold necklace around her neck and a slender bracelet with a heart-shaped pendant on her wrist, with the caption, "Brunch with my favorite people. Love being part of your little village, sweet girl." The account was private, but the username was marked as @angelm.lake. I showed Caleb the photo that night. He turned pale. "That's Marissa," he answered. "Sierra met her in an online parenting group. They've been getting close, but she told me Marissa was just helping out with babysitting." He contacted his lawyer the next day. Sierra had not simply relocated to Seattle for room. She had signed a temporary lease with Marissa. Shared custody was not her intention. She wanted to replace Caleb entirely, he told me. "She's building a case that I'm irrelevant. And now I'm starting to believe she planned this a long time ago." I said nothing, but I also believed it. I'd seen how she operated. She did not argue. She removed it. She erased. Clean and silent, just like she had with me. So I made my selection. I asked Caleb to let me handle the next phase. He did not like that. He said he didn't want me trapped in the middle, but I wasn't in the center anymore. I was already outside of it, looking in. I remembered something from some years ago. When Caleb and Sierra initially started dating, she would send me unsolicited articles about parenting techniques, food safety, emotional toxicity, and other topics. One of them had written a lengthy blog article about ethical parenting spaces. I remembered the name, Roots and River Collective. I did a Google search. Sure enough, they were based in Seattle. A combination of parenting blog, online therapy portal, and new age support group. A lot of ambiguous terminology. There are no surnames provided, but one shot shows Sierra in the background at a healing resort. Same smile, same attitude. Then I selected another option. Contributors. Marissa M. Lake. I scrolled over her posts. She had written about conscious co-parenting and the healing of the maternal wound. One item was titled, "Raising Without Paternal Energy, a Love Letter to Single Motherhood by Choice." That gave me all the information I needed. I printed the article, all of Marissa's posts. I built a binder. I included everything. The Instagram photo, the caption, and the group's mission statement. I then drove to Seattle. Caleb wanted to come. I replied, "No. This part needed to be mine." I reserved a room in a cheap motel and waited until Monday. Then I stepped into the Roots and River building, dressed in what Sierra used to call my Sunday church clothes. Plain pants, a modest shirt, and the old gold earrings Jack had given me for our 25th anniversary. I asked the front desk to speak with Marissa Lake. I stated that I was a possible donor interested in helping single mothers. They allowed me in. She greeted me in a bright, open workplace with plenty of plants and neutral carpeting. She offered me tea. I accepted. She didn't know who I was. "I'm so inspired by your work," I remarked gently. "I'm especially interested in the children you're helping. Do you ever serve as a full-time guardian?" She smiled, as courteous as Sierra. "Not formally, but I live with a mother and her daughter now. A beautiful situation." "Oh," I replied. "Would that be Sierra?" Her cheeks twitched, and I smiled. "You're holding someone else's child. I remarked quietly and firmly. And the father is still very much alive. You're not saving anyone. You're part of a lie. She stood up quickly, the phony smile gone. Who are you? I slid the folder across the desk. I'm the woman your blog says is a regressive influence unfit to nurture. I'm also a retired high school teacher. And you just gave me more than enough for a formal complaint to Child Protective Services. Her eyes narrowed. You wouldn't dare. I stood. I wouldn't need to. You left the door wide open. I went out without saying another word. Things had already begun to move when I returned home 2 days later. Sierra's lawyer called Caleb's lawyer and requested that the proceedings be paused. Marissa shut down her blog. The Instagram account became private. Sierra texted Caleb, requesting a follow-up on the co-parenting chat. But I wasn't finished yet, because I had one more thing to give her. And it would not be a book or a binder. It was something she would never forget. Caleb's lawyer contacted the following morning. You lit a fire under them, he remarked. Sierra's attorney is begging for a private settlement now. They want to avoid court. I was not surprised. That binder revealed more than simply Marissa's role as a de facto guardian. It revealed that Sierra had already emotionally replaced Caleb as a father. Judges don't like it. Not when a biological parent is present, stable and engaged. And not if there is public record. But I didn't want it to conclude with a silent agreement and everyone walking away with no consequences. That was not enough. Sierra had removed me from my son's life as if I were a horrible memory. She had made me feel small, backwards, and irrelevant inside my own family. And she attempted to take away my only grandson while smiling at brunch. I called Caleb. I'm coming to the meeting, I announced. He paused. You don't have to. I want to. The settlement meeting was scheduled for a neutral office space in Columbus. Sierra flew in. She brought her lawyer. Marissa wasn't there, but I knew she was watching from the shadows, as she always is. Sierra's face twisted slightly when she entered the conference room and spotted me sitting next to Caleb. Like she bit into something unpleasant and couldn't spit it out in front of the adults. She did not talk to me. He didn't even nod. Her lawyer began with a polished pitch. We believe it's in the best interest of the child to remain primarily in her mother's care while allowing the father flexible visitation. No, I replied. The lawyer blinked. Excuse me? I leaned forwards. She cut me out. Lied to Caleb. Took his child across the country. Had another woman caring for her without legal rights. Built a fake family. And now that it's falling apart, she wants to revisit things. I looked at Sierra. You made a point to tell me I couldn't evolve. So, let me show you what I've learned. I dug inside my purse and took out copies of fresh paperwork. I requested my former students to prepare an affidavit. Letters from mothers I've coached over the years. The director of the women's shelter where I donated the baby supplies stated that I was one of the most altruistic people he had ever met. The best example is a notarized statement from a former Roots and River employee. Someone who quietly exited after observing how Marissa handled co-living arrangements. She elaborated. Marissa manipulated young mothers into cutting off toxic influences so she could fill the space. That was her final sentence. I watched Sierra become isolated, paranoid, and totally dependent. This isn't co-parenting. This is coercion. Sierra's lawyer skimmed the documents. His face became white. Sierra attempted to speak, but her voice cracked. This is character assassination. No, Caleb replied. This is accountability. In the end, she had no option. They offered Caleb 50-50 custody on paper, but in actuality, it would be closer to 60-40 in his favor. He would keep their daughter in Ohio during the school year. Sierra may pay a visit during the summer and during breaks. They were compelled to meet with a court-appointed co-parenting counselor once a month. And Marissa? She was no longer allowed to have unsupervised contact with the child. The court found her friendship with Sierra disturbing. But even this wasn't enough for me. So, as I was leaving the building, I handed Sierra one last thing. A little envelope. She opened it directly in the hallway. Inside was a photograph of the old crib that they had deemed unsafe. Also, this was formerly home to a real family. Shame. You'll never know what that's like. She did not hunt me down. Did not yell. She just stood there, motionless, staring at it as the world went on around her. Weeks have passed. Caleb moved back into the house for a bit. We took things slowly. There were awkward silences and old pain. But we built piece by piece. The first time he brought my granddaughter here, she fell asleep in my lap while reading Guess How Much I Love You. I gazed down at her little hand, curled around mine, and realized I hadn't lost my family. I had just reclaimed it from someone who never deserved to have it. Now, every time I walk past that vacant guest room, freshly painted, crib replaced with a genuine toddler bed, bookcase full of new stories, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Not anger. No, not at all. Just peace. Genuine, calm tranquility. The kind that only arrives when the storm has passed and all wrongs have been resolved. My cheating wife moved into her lover's apartment and told me we won. 6 months later, she was pregnant, jobless, and sleeping in her car. My wife Tara and I had what I thought was a fairly nice marriage for the first 4 years. We met back in college. She was attractive as hell and seemed interested in my goals rather than just seeking a party. Dude, I was working on my business degree while she was doing educational things. We hit it off immediately. Following graduation, I embarked on my own consulting business. Those first few years were sheer torture. Working 80-plus-hour weeks, worrying about paying rent, the whole thing. Tara was actually very supportive back then. She would deliver me energy drinks at 2 a.m. when I was coding and give me pep talks when clients ignored me, all that girlfriend of the year stuff. She even recommended putting her teaching career on hold to help me build something amazing. It struck me as the most selfless act I'd ever witnessed. Looking back, I should have noticed the red flag flying in my face. We moved into this wonderful house in a good neighborhood after my business started producing excellent money. Tara became intensely involved with this local church. She began leading women's clubs, organizing charity activities, and continuously posting Bible quotes on Instagram, preaching about family values and the importance of marriage. However, by year 4, things began to feel wrong. It began with tiny things. She stopped inquiring about my day. Conversations that used to flow naturally were scripted, as if she was simply checking off boxes rather than truly listening. I'd ask simple questions like, "How was Bible study? Who showed up?" And she'd respond vaguely, clipped, as if she was in a hurry to shift the subject. What threw me off guard was her sudden interest in our finances, mainly my finances. Previously, she had been fine with having access to the credit cards and never inquired about the business. She suddenly wanted to know specific numbers. "How much did we make last quarter?" she would inquire unexpectedly. "What's the business value now? Do we have assets I don't know about?" At first, I assumed she was simply showing an interest, perhaps wanting to become more connected. Then I discovered she was photographing the financial statements I had left out. I discovered her looking through my office files one night when she thought I was sleeping. "Just organizing," she said, but I saw her scanning documents with her phone. Things were gradually escalating, and I could feel the tension between us increasing as the days passed. Then I noticed shifts in her routine. Her schedule became erratic, with late evenings and weekend trips that didn't match up. She'd leave the house wearing one clothing and return in another, dismissing it with a casual, "Oh, I spilled something." One night, I mentioned how little time we spent together now, how she appeared different. She rolled her eyes. "You're imagining things," she remarked, her voice flat. But she didn't look at me while she said it. Then she suddenly became quite protective of her phone. She bought new, sexier clothes, but I never saw her wear them. She'd come back with claims that didn't make sense, such as citing restaurants and towns we'd never been to or having receipts for only one hotel room, while she claimed 4 ladies had gone. I did not want to believe it. I assumed I was just worried as a result of my excessive workload. Then one night, she arrived home late, her hair slightly tangled and her makeup more smudged than normal. There was a faint, strange aroma clinging to her, something harsh, like a cologne I did not own. I asked casually at first, "Long night?" She hardly glanced at me as she kicked off her heels. "Yeah, Bible study ran late, then we grabbed dinner, you know how it is." Except I had no idea how that worked because Bible study used to stop at 8 and now she was walking past midnight as if it were normal. "Smells like someone spilled cologne on you," I commented, watching her reaction. That's when her posture shifted. Not guilty, but defensive. She scoffed and crossed her arms. "You're seriously paying attention now? Maybe if you weren't always at the office, you'd actually know what's going on in my life." That was not an answer. It was a deflection. And it worked just as she intended, shifting the blame to me. I could have pushed, but I didn't since I knew how this would turn out. If I accused her, she would cry and blame me for being paranoid and inattentive. I wasn't going to let her distort the narrative like way. So I got smart about it. I began examining credit card statements and her location history whenever she left her iPad open. Pro tip: women never log out of their accounts. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, she would spend exactly 2 to 3 hours at this place across town, an apartment complex. On Thursday, I decided to leave work early, parked across from the complex, and waited. Sure enough, at 2 p.m., Tara drew back sharply. 10 minutes later, this dude pulled up next to her. A tall guy, gym bro, with one of those tribal tattoos on his arm. Such a cliché. I took photos of them walking in together, all touchy-feely, and sitting in my car, angry. I saw my wife, the woman I had built my entire world around, stroll into another man's apartment with the same flirtatious enthusiasm she used to have with me. My mind was screaming at me to storm up there and tear down the door. But I pushed myself to stay put, for wrath is loud, and revenge is silent. When she returned 2 hours later, I shot additional photos. I watched them kiss as if they had all the time in the world. Something inside of me turned off right then. No more doubts. The woman I loved had died. The guy's name was Logan. I discovered this through her text conversations when she left her phone to shower one night. He worked at her church as a youth pastor or something. The irony was too thick. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I acquired more evidence. Screenshots of texts, further images of their encounters, hotel receipts from her purse, and even a taped phone call in which she told Logan that she was leaving me shortly and that they could finally be together. The most painful thing, however, was not just the dishonesty. It was discovering how long she'd been plotting my ruin. I reviewed her texts with Logan, and what I saw made me literally nauseous. This wasn't a spontaneous event. She had been scheming for months. I'm waiting for the right moment. He's too busy with work to notice anything. Once I file, I'll push for alimony. He won't see it coming. She wasn't just intending to leave me, she was using me to fund her new life, laughing with her boyfriend about how she'd ensure a smooth landing while leaving me high and dry. That's when I realized she wasn't simply walking away. I was making certain she left with nothing. I met with my business accountant after hours and kept things casual. Thinking about restructuring a few things, I reported. Over the next 2 weeks, I made a few financial decisions. I prepaid my office lease for 1 year. Paid back business loans faster. I changed my compensation such that more money stayed in the company rather than showing up as personal income. I invested in new equipment that I knew I'd need soon, but didn't necessarily need right now. On paper, it appeared like my business was controlling cash flow. Nothing untoward, simply routine operations that coincidentally made me appear much less liquid. At the same time, I created a second personal account with another bank and began moving tiny amounts. Nothing wild, just enough to make a cushion that she wouldn't have access to. Everything was legal and properly documented. I wasn't hiding any money. I just wanted to make sure she didn't get more than she deserved. Then, unexpectedly, she did me a favor. On a random Tuesday, she decided to blow it all up herself. When I got home from work, she was sitting on our couch with this bizarre, pleased expression on her face. "Adam," she answered. "All fake, sweet. We need to talk." I knew what was about to happen, but I pretended not to know. "What's up?" "I'm pregnant." We hadn't been together in months, so unless she was carrying baby Jesus 2.0, this wasn't mine. Before I could respond, she twisted the knife. "But it's not yours. I've been seeing someone else. I want a divorce." She stated it as if she were ordering takeout. No remorse, no hesitation. After 5 years of marriage, she threw it away like an old coupon. I could feel the wrath rising beneath my skin, and my hands flexed at my sides. Every instinct told me to throw the entire folder of evidence in her face, drag her through the mud right then and there. But then it struck me. It was perfect. She had no idea what I already knew. No idea I had been observing, documenting, and waiting. She believed she had complete control, and was the one who would bring things to an end. I let out a slow smirk. "I see." It threw her off. She was ready for me to explode, plead, or ask who. But I sat there as quiet as ever. She doubled down. "And just so you know, you'll still be paying me alimony. I gave up my career for you, so you owe me." I locked eyes with her. "Tara," I commented, "did you really think I wouldn't know about Logan?" Her face lost its color. I chuckled. "Tuesdays and Thursdays, right? 2 to 3 hours, same apartment complex, same parking spot. You didn't even try to mix it up. You really thought I was that stupid? She stiffened and her jaw tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, come on. I leaned back, stretched my arms across the back of the couch as if I had all the time in the world. Bible study runs late, huh? That must be a hell of a lesson plan if it requires lingerie in a hotel room. And Logan, was my next response. Real winner you picked there. Youth pastor, huh? Wonder how his congregation would feel about him knocking up a married woman while preaching family values. She was now completely panicked. She sat up taller, her gaze darting around as if she were looking for an exit. How long were you going to play with me, Tara? I inquired, tilting my head. You and your little boy toy were waiting for the right moment, right? Planning to milk me dry before you ran off together. What was it you said? He won't see it coming. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish panting for oxygen. I did not let her recover. I stood up. Let me make something very clear. You are not walking away from this as the winner. You are not taking a damn thing from me that I don't let you have. She attempted to recover, disguising her dread with false assurance. It's the law, Adam. You can fight it all you want, but you'll lose. I gave her the smuggest smile I'd ever given someone in my life. If you say so, I answered simply. She thought she was hitting me with the ultimate power move, but in reality, she was saving me from trouble. All I had to do was smile and make her believe she was in control. Meanwhile, I had already moved 5 steps ahead. The next 2 weeks were bizarre. Tara moved out practically immediately, directly into Logan's flat. She filed for divorce, alleging irreconcilable differences, which is sophisticated legal speak for, I want to bang other dudes without feeling bad about it. I met with a group of lawyers. The first 3 essentially informed me I was screwed. No-fault divorce state was probably their favorite phrase. Apparently the fact that my wife was banging the youth pastor and was knocked up by him didn't matter in court. But I kept seeking until I found an attorney. Let's call him Victor, who didn't sugarcoat things. Look man, I'm not going to lie to you, he told you. You're probably going to have to pay her something, but we can try to minimize the damage. When I showed Victor my financial statements, he raised his eyebrows. Interesting timing on some of these business expenses and restructuring, he commented, looking at me. He didn't say much more about it because he couldn't legally encourage me to hide assets, but I could tell he knew what I'd done. Well, this might help reduce the alimony calculation somewhat, but in this state, you're still looking at significant payments. That is when the wheels started turning. The courts may not care about her cheating, but her holier-than-thou church friends will. However, I resolved to keep my cool during the divorce proceedings. Let her believe she was winning, give her only enough rope to hang herself. Court day was weird. I arrived in my nicest suit. Tara arrived with her pricey lawyer, dressed modestly, as if she were auditioning for Sister Wives. It was almost funny how false the act was. Before we even started, the judge appeared to be extremely bored. Tara's lawyer spoke first, telling a sob tale about how she gave up her promising profession to support me, how she managed our home while I established my business, and how she deserved to be compensated for her services to the marriage. When it was our turn, my lawyer presented the evidence. Her adultery, the pregnancy, and the fact that she was already living with Logan. Her attorney stood up. Your Honor, let's not forget that we are in a no-fault state, he added smugly, as if those 3 words erased everything she had done. While my client deeply regrets that her marriage did not work out, the law is clear. Marital misconduct is not a factor in determining spousal support. What is relevant is the financial disparity between these 2 parties. Hearing how carelessly she ignored all she had done made me want to smash the entire courtroom apart. She cheated. She lied. She became pregnant with another man's child, and I was still required to compensate her for leaving me. My lawyer tried to push back, setting out all of the information again and underlining that she wasn't simply leaving a marriage, but also establishing a financial safety net while living with someone else. But the judge only sighed, waiting for us to finish. When it was time for the ruling, he cleared his throat and lowered the hammer. While the court acknowledges Mr. Carter's concerns regarding his wife's infidelity, the law in this state is clear. Spousal misconduct is not a factor in determining alimony. Tara sneered at me from across the room. The judge proceeded. Given Mrs. Carter's financial dependence during the marriage and her current unemployment status, the court finds that she is entitled to spousal support. Mr. Carter will pay $4,500 monthly for a period of 4 years, or until Mrs. Carter remarries. $4,500 every month for 4 years to the woman who cheated on me while carrying another man's child. I felt as if I were taking wild medicines. But fortunately, my financial decisions paid off, sort of. Rather than being left with a $6,000 monthly payment, the judge reduced it to $4,500. Not ideal, but better than nothing. The greatest part? Tara and her lawyer had no idea about the money I still had stowed away, or that my business would miraculously recover once this was all done. Tara couldn't help but appear smug as we walked out of court. "Told you," she said quietly as we passed. "Should have just agreed to my terms from the beginning." Then she had the audacity to phone Logan in front of me. "Baby, it's done. We won." She giggled like a teenager. "He has to pay. I told you the judge wouldn't care about the other stuff." I said nothing. Just watched her walk away, believing she had pulled off the ultimate deception. But the game was only getting begun. I paid the first alimony check on time. I did not complain. Did not raise a fuss. Even sent a courteous email. "Payment sent. Please confirm the receipt." Tara seemed shocked that I wasn't a jerk about it. They probably expected me to be bitter, quarrel, and give her more ammunition. Instead, I was portraying the ideal ex-husband. Courteous, timely in payment, distant, but not unfriendly. She had no idea what was coming. Tara was more than simply a Harvest Community Church member, she was also their poster child. She oversaw the women's ministry, planned marriage retreats, and spoke on stage during services about God's design for holy marriages. Her father was a deacon. Her mother ran Sunday school. The entire family projected a wonderful Christian image, and I knew they'd throw her under the bus the moment they discovered who she truly was. I'd been gathering everything: DNA test results, time-stamped images of her and Logan, screenshots of their obscene texts, hotel receipts, and even a recording of her insulting her church buddies for being uptight prudes. That one was especially juicy. I put everything in a neat, professional folder, added a cover letter that was quite polite and proper. "To the elders at Harvest Community Church, I regret bringing this to your attention, but as a fellow believer, I believe it is my job. My ex-wife, Tara Carter, who oversees multiple ministries in your church, has been engaging in behavior that defies your church's principles. I've given documentation of her affair, which began during our marriage and resulted in an unrelated pregnancy, as proven by DNA testing. Tara is now living with this man and receiving considerable alimony from me. I'm sharing this not out of spite, but out of concern for the integrity of your ministry. Respectfully, Adam Carter." I dropped off the package early Sunday morning when no one was present, and then went home to wait for the storm to pass. The Sunday after I dropped off my small care package at church, my phone blew up. Text messages from common church friends. "Dude, what did you do? Pastor just called an emergency elder meeting before service. Tara's losing it." I simply turned off my phone and went back to sleep. It felt incredible. Not a lie. Later that afternoon, I received a voicemail from Tara. She was shouting so loudly that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "You absolute piece of garbage. How could you do this to me? They kicked me out of the women's ministry. My dad won't even look at me. You've ruined everything." I deleted it without phoning back. I do not need that negativity in my life, you know. More messages arrived throughout the week, each more urgent than the last. Her church friends ignored her. Her parents were taking time to pray about the matter, which meant, "We're disappointed in you." The Christian school where she volunteered requested her not to return. Even Logan was getting cold feet. Apparently, he did not sign up for all of this turmoil. He thought he was receiving a lovely woman and a solid alimony payment. Instead, he became a social outcast, with a baby on the way and a lot of baggage. By Friday, he had kicked her out of his flat. So much for pure love, right? Tara was summoned to a formal disciplinary hearing with the church elders just a week after my evidence was dismissed. I know because she contacted me sobbing and begged me to tell them everything was a misunderstanding. "Adam, please. They're going to publicly discipline me. Do you know what that means? They'll announce it to the entire congregation. Everyone will know." "They already know, Tara. That's kind of how church gossip works. My dad might lose his position over this. My family has been at Harvest for 3 generations. Should have thought about that before you slept with the youth pastor." She stayed quiet for a moment, then said in a little voice, "He's not talking to me anymore." "Who? Your dad?" No, Logan. He said this is too much drama, that I misled him about the divorce being clean and simple. I couldn't help laughing. So, your soulmate bailed the second things got tough. Shocking. I have nowhere to go, Adam. My parents won't let me stay with them. None of my friends are returning my calls. Sounds like a personal problem. Can I come home? Just until I figure things out? Oh, this woman has so much nerve. It's not your home anymore, Tara. You gave that up when you decided to cheat. She began crying again with huge dramatic sobs. What am I supposed to do? Get a hotel. You've got alimony money coming in. Figure it out. Then I hung up. Cold, perhaps. But after what she pulled, my sympathy tank was completely empty. The church hearing took place Wednesday night. By Thursday morning, the news had spread throughout the neighborhood. Tara had been formally identified as an adulteress and dismissed from all church responsibilities. The preacher preached an entire sermon about the sacredness of marriage and the consequences of sin, never mentioning Tara specifically but making it very clear who he was referring to. Her parents took a break from church leadership. Her sister postponed her wedding, which was due to take place at harvest. The entire family was essentially in exile. And Logan? He had already requested a transfer to another church in a different state, leaving Tara pregnant and alone. I remained on the sidelines throughout. I did not have to lift a finger. The community she admired most had done all of the difficult lifting for me. Small religious communities are tied to everything. Tara's church collapse set off a chain reaction that I could not have predicted better. First, the private Christian school where she worked part-time experienced budget constraints and canceled her position. The principal couldn't look her in the eyes when he told her. Then, her volunteer opportunities dried up. The crisis pregnancy center where she counseled young women determined that her current circumstances made her an unsuitable role model. The charity where she coordinated fundraising drives said that it was reorganizing its volunteer program. Every aspect of her identity was gradually chipped away. And I just kept paying the alimony on schedule every month. 3 weeks after the church scandal surfaced, I received a text from our former neighbor. Tara's living in her car in the Walmart parking lot. I did not answer, but I did drive by later that night. Sure enough, her Honda was parked in the far corner of the lot. I could see her silhouette in the driver's seat, lit by her phone screen. The following day, she called me again. I lost my job, she remarked, her tone dull. No tears this time, just a hollow defeat. That sucks. The baby's due in 5 months. No one will hire me. My parents still won't talk to me. I said nothing. I've been sleeping in my car, she eventually acknowledged. I can't afford both a car payment and an apartment on just the alimony. Sounds like poor financial planning. She breathed sharply. Is this what you wanted? To see me completely destroyed? I considered it for a second. You know what? Yeah, pretty much. I was stupid. I made a mistake. I never meant to hurt you. I shut her off. I don't care. She swallowed back a sob. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I smirked. Cool. Good luck with your new life. That's when I decided to play my last card. It's time to terminate this on my terms. Actually, I added, keeping my tone casual, I might have a solution that works for both of us. What kind of solution? Tara inquired, suddenly attentive. I could almost sense the anguish in her voice. I'm getting tired of writing these monthly checks, I added, keeping my tone casual. And my business is expanding. I'm looking at opening an office in Singapore. Might move there for a while. What does that have to do with me? Well, international alimony enforcement is complicated, and I've been talking to a new lawyer who thinks we might have grounds to revisit the settlement based on some creative interpretations of the law. Of course, that was complete nonsense, but Tara didn't know, and she had no right to challenge me. What are you saying? Her voice was panicked. I'm saying I'd like to buy you out. One lump sum payment instead of monthly alimony for the next 4 years. She remained silent as she considered the situation. How much? She finally inquired. $90,000 cash, tax-free. You sign a document releasing me from all future obligations, and the money's yours today. Tara had no idea I could afford that lump sum simply. The adjustments I took earlier saved a large portion of my money, and my business was already recovering. She and her lawyer never discovered half of what I had. To her, $90,000 felt like a lifeline, yet it was less than half of what I'd owe her over the entire alimony term, representing a significant discount. However, for someone living in their car, pregnant and broke, that probably sounded like winning the lottery. I don't know, she said. My lawyer said. Your lawyer isn't sleeping in a Walmart parking lot, I told him. And this offer expires in 24 hours. After that, I start the process to challenge the alimony ruling, and you get nothing while we battle it out in court for the next year or two. More silence. I could almost hear the wheels moving in her mind. Can I think about it? Sure, you've got until this time tomorrow. Then I'm moving forward with the challenge. I hung up without waiting for an answer. She called back 2 hours later. I'll take it, she replied gently. Smart choice. I'll have the paperwork ready in the morning. Meet me at my lawyer's office at 9 a.m. Adam, she said quietly. Thank you. I nearly laughed. Don't thank me, Tara. This isn't mercy. It's business. The next morning, she arrived at the lawyer's office looking like hell. She had dark circles under her eyes, her hair was unkempt, and she was dressed in the same clothes I had seen through the car window. My lawyer had the documentation ready, a full release of all future alimony obligations, in exchange for a one-time payment. I had already prepared the cashier's check. Tara had barely read the contracts before signing. When my lawyer slid the check across the table, her hands trembled as she took it. So, that's it? She inquired. We're done? I nodded. Completely done. I don't ever want to hear from you again. She seemed like she wanted to say more, but instead nodded and went away. As the door shut behind her, my lawyer shook his head. You know, most guys in your position wouldn't have offered her anything. I told him it was worth $90,000 to be free from her forever, and I intended it. The monthly payments didn't damage me financially, but they were a continual reminder of how she had duped me. Now I was entirely liberated, free to move forward without her shadow hanging over me. Besides, I knew Tara. She'd spend that money in 6 months and then have nothing. No alimony, no employment opportunities, and no backup plan. Meanwhile, I would be establishing my empire, living my best life, and never looking back. Around 6 months later, I ran into her at a gas station. I didn't plan it. It was just one of those random events. She looked rough, possibly pregnant again. I didn't ask or care. Driving a beat-up old Civic instead of the luxury car she had during our marriage. She stopped dead in her tracks when she spotted me filling up my new BMW. I nodded at her to be polite, you know. She walked over with hesitation. There was uneasy silence. Then she said, "How are you?" I shrugged. "Business is good. Life is good." She nodded and looked down at her feet. That's good." More uneasy silence. "The money's gone," she finally said. "I had to pay off debt, and the rest went to rent and food." I simply gazed at her. "Not my problem." "I know, I don't know why I'm telling you this." I finished pumping gasoline. "Well, good luck with everything." I began to go back into my car, but she remarked, "I'm sorry, Adam, for everything. I really am." I gazed at her for a long time. Was it satisfying to watch her like this? Honestly, not as much as I expected, but I didn't feel sorry for her either. Too little, too late, Tara. Then I got into my car and drove away. I have not seen her since. Things for me have been going great. I met an incredible woman. She is wonderful. She owns her own marketing agency, works hard, plays hard, and does not engage in any games or bullshit. We moved in together 3 months ago. There's no urgency to get married again. Once bitten, twice shy, and all that. But I could see that happening with her someday. She's the real deal. I tried not to get involved in Tara's affairs, but knowledge spreads quickly in a small town like this. Furthermore, we still have some mutual acquaintances who periodically send information my way. How much did I give her? $90,000. Gone in around 4 months. Apparently she utilized it to pay off credit card debt I had no idea about. She got a cheap apartment and spent the rest of her money attempting to retain her old lifestyle rather than adapting to her new reality. Tara was the epitome of a budgeting failure. She had a baby boy. Logan is legally obligated to pay child support, but from what I've heard, he's a deadbeat who consistently falls behind. As previously said, he relocated to Ohio and has little to no contact with the child. I guess his call to youth ministry didn't extend to his own children. Shocking. Tara attempted to continue her teaching career, but her reputation followed her. No Christian school would accept her, and public schools required recent experience, which she lacked. Last I heard, she was working in a call center, earning little more than the minimum wage. The true karma is what occurred with her family. Her parents eventually forgiven her after roughly 8 months of shunning, but the relationship is still tense. They occasionally assist with the infant but are constantly making comments about horrible life choices and live with the repercussions. Her sister keeps her distance, clearly concerned that Tara's reputation may impact her own standing in the church. Tara attempted to rejoin the church community, but things did not go well. They allow her to attend services, but she is barred from ever holding a position of leadership. She sits in the back and exits immediately after the service ends. No more women's ministry, no more marital retreats, and no more social standing. The ultimate irony. A common friend informed me that she has been telling others that she made a mistake and should have worked on her marriage. Too late. As for me, I am doing better than ever. Business is growing, my relationship is secure, and I've started doing things I've always wanted to attempt but never had the time for. I earned my pilot's license, started mountain biking, and even began learning guitar. I've learned my lesson. Sometimes the worst things that happen to you result in the best version of your life. You simply have to be willing to destroy the necessary bridges and never look back. I have more important things to focus on. Oh, and one last thought for anyone going through something similar. Document everything. Take screenshots, save texts, get evidence. It may not aid in court in no-fault divorce jurisdictions, but knowledge is power, and you never know when you'll need it. Goodbye. Only bad people get sick, father said. Then tried to force dying sister to sign away her insurance. But her 10-year-old daughter has the proof. I was 10 when Aunt Susan moved in with us. She was bald and much thinner than I had recalled her. I have stage 3 lymphoma. Can I stay here for a while? She was crying and appeared to be about to faint, but my parents only gave her an unpleasant look. But then they exchanged glances, as if they were thinking the same thing, and turned to Susan, telling her that they'd love to take her in, and would be there for her every step of the way. Initially, they maintained their word. All eyes were on her. The dinner table was crowded with chemo-related queries, support group recommendations, and Mom delivering what she read online from survivors. Susan seemed overjoyed and cherished. She looked like she was about to explode, but not even 3 weeks in, everything changed. Mom began fussing about Susan's medical appointments, which disturbed her book club schedule. Dad began bringing his dinner to his study because being with Susan made him too depressed to eat. They transferred her to the downstairs guest room and began putting her meals on a tray outside her door, as if she had a contagious condition. "Don't spend too much time with her," Mom advised me one morning as I packed my lunch. "She won't be here for long, and I don't want you to become too attached." When I asked why they were being so nasty to someone who was sick, Dad answered something that made my stomach twist. Only bad people get sick. She must have done something terrible to deserve this. Susan, however, was not a horrible person. After my parents went to bed, she'd sneak upstairs and play board games with me. She assisted me with my arithmetic homework, which Mom was always too busy to look at. This wasn't the strange part, however. The strange thing was that my parents kept telling me that Susan would die soon, almost as if they were convincing me or manifesting it. But what they claimed did not seem true. Susan appeared to be getting better. Her cheeks grew rounder, and she stopped appearing exhausted all the time. She even joked once that she felt unusually healthy for someone who was supposed to be dying, but I didn't quite get what she meant. Everything changed when these bigger kids started picking on me when I was walking to school. I was afraid as they threw rocks at me and called me names. I asked Mom to walk me, but she insisted it was her yoga time, and she couldn't miss it. Dad wanted some quiet time in the break room before starting work, so he couldn't do it either. I assumed I'd have to face the bullies alone until one morning, Susan appeared at the front door, fully dressed. "Sick or not, nobody messes with you," she told me. The hike was long, but she didn't mind. What's fantastic is that when the bullies saw the pale, bald woman heading toward them, they scattered. Susan began walking me every morning after that, and I observed that she became stronger and faster with each passing day. Mom was outraged when she stayed at home one morning and discovered Susan was walking me. "You're too sick for this. Stop confusing her. She needs to prepare for you to die." I didn't even have a chance to defend Susan. I just witnessed her cry as they barred her from the family areas and informed me she was only seeking attention with her disease. One night, I couldn't sleep and went to get some water. Susan was crying at the kitchen table, with Mom and Dad hovering over her. There were papers everywhere, and Mom was pointing to various paperwork. "You need to be practical about this," your mother replied. "We'll have funeral costs. Think of Sarah's future." My dad said, "That was my name. Private school isn't cheap. The least you can do is provide for the family that took you in." I realized what was happening. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. "Stop!" I yelled, rushing into the kitchen. "She's getting better. You just want her money. You tell me she's bad, but she's the only one who's nice to me." Mom grabbed my arm and dragged me into my room. "She's poisoned you against us," she growled, then locked my door. Later that night, I heard gentle knocks. Susan slipped inside and sat on my bed. She shook, and tears streamed down her cheeks. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. I assured her that her secrets were safe with me before placing my hand over my heart. She gazed at me as if she was the proudest aunt in the world. "I know this is a lot to tell you, but you're a big girl. You'll understand. My whole life, they've treated me like I don't exist. I had no birthdays, no gifts, no cake, and no chocolate. But my brothers did. When I was your age, I always thought that, no matter what, they would never care about me." "That's sad," I said, perplexed but sad for her. "So now that I'm all big and grown, I thought that maybe if I was dying, maybe they'd finally love me, even for a little bit." "You're going to die," I exclaimed too loudly. She chuckled. "No, sweetie. What I'm trying to say is it's all fake. I don't have cancer. I'm not dying. I shaved my head and didn't eat so I could look like I have cancer. I wanted to see if they cared, but they didn't." My eyes expanded. "That is so smart. Can I help you?" I made a request. "Actually, you can." Susan revealed her intentions while sitting on my bed. She needed me to convince my parents that she was getting worse, not better. She suggested that if they believed she was truly dying, they might finally display genuine emotion. I nodded enthusiastically, thrilled to be a part of something significant. She trained me what to say and how to appear, worried when people inquired about her. We rehearsed, appearing unhappy and concerned. Susan instructed me how to make my voice waver slightly when I mentioned how exhausted she was. It was like we were performing a play together. The next morning, I began our strategy. At breakfast, I pushed my cereal around and told Mom I was concerned about Susan. I mentioned she appeared weaker yesterday and had difficulty walking up the stairs. Mom's eyes lit up in an unusual way, which made me uneasy. She asked for further information, and I offered her what Susan and I had practiced. Dad put down his newspaper, and they exchanged another of those looks. Mom squeezed my hand and said that it was normal for sick people to decline. Her speech was soft, but her smile was excessively large. Over the next 3 days, I continued to leave hints. I'd remark Susan coughing more or needing to rest after doing easy things. My parents ate it up. They began to check on her more frequently, but not in a sympathetic manner. They'd glance into her chamber and nod, as if to confirm something. Mom even began humming as she cooked dinner. It was unsettling how thrilled they looked about Susan allegedly being unwell. Susan delivered an outstanding performance. When they were observing, she would move slowly and lean against walls for support. She would miss meals and make sure they noticed the full tray outside her door. She would cough loudly as they walked by the basement. I assisted by appearing concerned every time they brought her up. We were a good squad. We'd meet in my room at night and make plans for the following day. Susan would tell me I was doing well, which made me feel special. However, things began to take an unusual turn. My folks got more insistent about those papers. They would deliver them to Susan several times each day. Mom would sit on her bed and talk about responsibility. Dad would stand in the doorway, mentioning my college fund. They weren't even attempting to hide their desires anymore. Susan would cry, claiming she needed more time to consider. They would leave, yet always return. The pressure remained unchanged. One afternoon, Mom approached me and drew me aside. She claimed Susan was selfish in refusing to sign the documents. She said that when individuals are dying, they should focus on the living. Her grasp on my shoulder was excessively tight. She said I should chat to Susan about doing the right thing. I nodded, but felt awful within. That night, I told Susan what Mom had said. Susan's face turned pale, and she hugged me tightly. She murmured, "I don't know what to do anymore." The following week became worse. My parents began threatening Susan. They'd remark things like, how difficult it must be to be sick and alone. They'd question, aloud, if she'd be more comfortable in a facility. Dad indicated that he knew a place that accepted terminal patients without insurance. Mom added that, yes, family was great, but only if everyone cooperated. The threats were plain, even if they were delivered with a smile. Susan began to appear physically ill as a result of her stress. I tried to help by informing my parents that Susan appeared too frail to make important decisions. But it backfired. They simply pressed harder, claiming she needed to sign before becoming too ill to be legally capable. They began taking the papers to all interactions. Breakfast included papers. Lunch included papers. Even when they delivered her medicine, they would tuck paperwork underneath. Susan was trapped, as was I. One day, I decided to record what was happening. My mother had forgotten about this little camera I had received for my birthday. It was pink and fit into my pocket. I began snapping photos of them pushing Susan. I got one of Mom pointing to papers while Susan cried. Another image showed Dad blocking the entryway while carrying documents. I hid the camera in the garage after shooting photos every day. I figured if someone spotted them, they'd aid us. However, my parents spotted the camera in my room. I got home from school, and Mom was sitting on my bed, clutching it. Her face was both terrifying and calm. She questioned why I was photographing family moments. I tried to lie, but she was already aware. Dad appeared at my doorway, and they both began yelling. They claimed I was ungrateful, and that Susan had turned me against them. They confiscated my camera and grounded me permanently. Except for school and meals, I am not allowed to watch TV, play games, or leave my room. That night was horrible. I could hear them yelling at Susan from the vents. They accused her of manipulating me. They said she was using her false illness to turn their daughter against them. Susan attempted to explain, but they would not listen. I heard her sobbing and objects being flung around. Susan woke up with a bruise on her arm, which she attempted to conceal with long sleeves. She would not tell me what had happened, but I knew. Susan chose to tell them the truth. She hoped that if they realized she wasn't truly sick, they would ease the strain on the documents. We arranged it meticulously. She would admit everything and apologize for lying. Maybe they'd be angry, but at least the insurance crap would end. I considered it risky, but Susan was desperate. She couldn't take any more of their threats and manipulation. The confession didn't go as planned. Susan sat them down and explained everything. She explained why she faked the cancer. She claimed she only wanted them to adore her. She apologized again, but my parents were not as surprised or outraged as we expected. Instead, they received a calculating look. Susan's mom stated that she was plainly mentally unwell. Dad also stated that someone who faked cancer could not be trusted. They twisted everything around. They exploited her confession against her. They informed me that Susan was dangerous and deluded. They claimed that people who lie about being sick are capable of anything. Mom sobbed phony tears over Susan's betrayal of their confidence. Dad claimed they attempted to help her, but she was too far gone. They made me question everything. For a few days, I didn't know who to believe. Susan appeared depressed and defeated. My parents appeared concerned and hurt. I felt bewildered and afraid. But then I noticed them planning. They assumed I was sleeping, but I overheard them conversing. They said Susan's confession was wonderful. Now, if she tried to escape or tell anyone, they'd call her insane. Who would believe someone who lied about having cancer? They might keep her papers and claim she was not mentally competent to make judgments. They mocked Susan for telling the truth. That's when I knew for certain who the true terrible guys were. I snuck down to meet Susan that night. She was trapped in the basement room. They'd put a padlock on the outside. I murmured through the door that I believed her and apologized for my doubts. She cried and claimed it was not my fault. She told me she was going to depart as soon as possible. She claimed she'd come back for me once she was settled. I believed her, but I was afraid they wouldn't let her go. The next day, my parents pretended nothing was wrong. They had breakfast and talked about usual things, but Susan's tray stood outside the locked door, becoming cold. They'd only let her out to use the restroom, and even then, Mom would stand guard. They informed me Susan needed time to reflect on her behavior. They claimed it was for her own good. The place felt like a prison to both of us. At school, I attempted to tell my teacher, Mrs. Henderson. She was usually friendly and looked willing to help. I waited till after class and asked if I could speak with her. I told her about Susan being locked up and my parents being harsh, but I was only 10 years old and didn't express anything clearly. Mrs. Henderson was concerned, but said that her family's troubles were complicated. She claimed she'd consider what to do, but nothing happened. Susan was still locked up when I arrived home. I felt hopeless until I remembered our neighbor, Mrs. Zhang. She lived next door and would constantly wave as she walked her small dog. She'd offered me cookies before when I helped her carry groceries. Maybe she'd listen. I wrote her a note to explain everything. I sketched illustrations of the locked door with Susan in tears. When my parents weren't watching, I folded it up a little and slipped it into her mailbox. Then I waited. Mrs. Zhang knocked on our door the following day. I watched from the staircase as my parents responded. She expressed alarm about weird noises coming from our residence. My folks turned on the charm instantly. Mom laughed and explained that Susan was going through a difficult time. Dad described her mental health difficulties and how they were attempting to help. They invited Mrs. Zhang inside for coffee and biscuits. By the time she departed, she had apologized for bothering them. My heart fell. That night, my folks were especially cautious. They scheduled Susan's meals at odd times so that neighbors wouldn't notice any patterns. They wrapped weather stripping around her door to conceal sounds. They said if I informed anyone else, Susan would be sent away permanently. Mom grabbed my face, forcing me to look at her. She explained that Susan was sick in the head and required their assistance. She added that if I truly loved my aunt, I would stop causing issues. I nodded because I was terrified, but I kept thinking about how I might assist. Susan and I needed a better plan. During one of her restroom stops, I handed her a message. It stated we had to flee together. She slid one back to me, saying she was working on something. We couldn't say much, but we exchanged notes whenever we could. She urged me to get ready and pack a tiny bag. I hid clothes and snacks underneath my bed. I also found some cash in Dad's jacket and stole it. I assumed we'd need it more than he did. My parents must have detected something. They were increasingly paranoid and controlling. They locked my window and took my backpack every day after school. They looked through my pockets and searched my room. Mom started walking me to school rather than allowing me to go alone. She'd grip my hand too tightly and remind me to be a good daughter. I smiled and consented, but inwardly, I was screaming. One morning, Susan's door was open. I dashed downstairs, but she wasn't present. My folks were enjoying breakfast as usual. When I asked where she was, Mom answered she had gone to a special hospital. Dad said that it was for her own benefit. They promised she'd get the help she needed. I knew they were lying, but I could not prove it. I cried, and they sent me to school as if nothing had occurred. Mrs. Henderson asked whether I was okay, and I just nodded my head. That afternoon I discovered Susan in the basement. They had placed her in a storage area with no windows. It was smaller and darker than her previous room. She looked horrible and terrified. She murmured that they were plotting something horrible. She had heard them. On the phone discussing power of attorney. She wasn't sure what that meant, but she knew it was about managing her money. We held hands through the crack beneath the door. I decided to get smarter. I pretended to be a perfect daughter. I stopped inquiring about Susan and pretended I believed their falsehoods. I assisted with housework and smiled at dinner. It killed me within, but it worked. They slowly relaxed. They stopped inspecting my room and allowed me to walk to school with the other students. Mom even congratulated me for my maturity. Dad patted my hair and said he was confident I would come around. I wanted to throw up. Meanwhile, I was plotting. I'd recovered my camera from the garage, where I had originally hidden it. They forgot to check there after discovering it in my room. I resumed recording, but more attentively. I'd pretend to play in the basement and record Susan's shut door. I recorded them stealing her food and not allowing her to leave. I captured recordings of them discussing her money. The camera accumulated evidence. Just needed someone to show it to. I recall Susan mentioning her brother Gabriel. She stated he lived a few hours away and they hadn't spoken in years. My parents never mentioned him, which seemed strange. I grabbed an old address book on Mom's desk and looked him up. Gabriel was listed with a phone number. I memorized it and waited for my opportunity. It arrived when my parents attended their book club. They left me with stern instructions to remain in my room. Instead, I used the kitchen telephone. Gabriel responded on the third ring. His voice sounded similar to Susan's, but deeper. I spoke quickly, explaining who I was and what was occurring. I told him about the fictitious cancer and the actual jail. I said Susan needed help and that my parents were awful people. He remained quiet for a long time. Then he asked for our address and promised to handle it. He warned me to be cautious and act normally. I hung up, feeling optimistic for the first time in weeks. The following few days were tense. I kept expecting Gabriel to arrive, but nothing happened. My parents maintained their routine. Susan remained locked up. I began to worry that I had imagined the phone call, or that Gabriel did not believe me. Perhaps he was like my parents and did not care about Susan. I felt stupid for hoping, but I continued to record with my camera just in case. The memory card was nearly full. Mrs. Zhang returned, but this time she was not alone. A tall man with Susan's eyes stood next to her. It was Gabriel. When my parents answered the door, their faces turned white. Gabriel pushed past them, demanding to see Susan. Dad tried to say she wasn't there, but Gabriel didn't believe him. He claimed he knew she was locked up and had proof. Mrs. Zhang held up her phone to show a video. It was one I'd removed from the locked door. I realized Mrs. Zhang had found my camera. I had hidden it in her garden while playing outside. She must have found it and viewed the videos. She contacted Gabriel and showed him everything. My parents attempted to lie by claiming that the videos were fake. Mom accused Susan of being mentally ill. Dad threatened to call the cops, but Gabriel simply laughed. He suggested they explain their crimes to the cops. The word crimes caused them to freeze. Gabriel discovered Susan and let her out. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing. She appeared so small and fragile. He helped her upstairs while my parents followed, making excuses. They said they were protecting her from herself. They claimed she was dangerous and delusional. They even showed him the papers they wanted her to sign. Gabriel's face got darker with each word. He told them they were pathetic and cruel. He said he'd suspected something when I called, but the videos confirmed it. My parents turned on me then. Mom screamed that I'd betrayed them. Dad said I was an ungrateful brat who didn't understand adult matters. They blamed Susan for poisoning me against them. They said, "We'd regret this," when Susan showed her true crazy colors. But their words didn't hurt anymore. I could see them clearly now. They were the sick ones, not Susan. They were so consumed by greed they'd lost their humanity. Gabriel called the police, but did not arrest anyone. He wanted a record of Susan's condition and the locked rooms. The officers took pictures and statements. My parents had to stand there while Susan explained everything. She told them about the fake illness and why she did it. She showed them the bruises and described the imprisonment. The cops looked disgusted but said, without more evidence, it was a family dispute. Still, having a report helped. Susan packed her things while Gabriel watched my parents. They tried more manipulation tactics. They cried about taking Susan in when she was sick. They mentioned all the money they'd spent on her food and shelter. They said she owed them for their kindness. Susan just kept packing. When they brought up the insurance papers, she finally spoke. She stated they'd shown their true selves, and she felt sad for me having them as parents. That hit them where it stung. They started ranting about parental rights and how they'd never let me go. Mom grabbed my arm and dragged me to her side. Dad stood between me and Susan like a guard. They said I was their daughter and would stay with them. Gabriel stepped forward and suggested it could be arranged through proper means. He referenced lawyers and custody evaluations. The threat made them back down a little. Susan knelt in front of me. She assured me she wasn't abandoning me. She claimed she needed to get safe first, then she'd fight for me. She gave me a phone number and made me memorize it. She embraced me close and murmured that she loved me. I told her I loved her too, and understood. It was the worst goodbye, but I knew she had to leave. Staying would have destroyed her spirit, if not her body. After they had left, the house felt empty. My parents raged for hours. They flung stuff and blamed one another. They blamed Susan, Gabriel, and Mrs. Zhang. They mostly blamed me, but they soon got weary of it. They sent me to my room, and I overheard their conversation. They were worried about what others would say. The police visit prompted neighbors to chatter. Their reputation meant everything to them. The following few weeks were weird. My parents attempted to appear normal, but the facade was crumbling. People at church muttered as we passed by. Mom's book club buddies had stopped calling. Dad's co-workers posed awkward questions. Despite their best efforts, the story spread. They were unable to charm their way out of this one. The entire community knew something awful had happened at our house. They attempted to woo me back with presents and goodies. Mom bought me several new clothes and toys. Dad offered to take me to an amusement park. They stated they loved me and only wanted our family to be happy. But I saw through it. They wanted me to assure everyone that everything was all right. They needed me to repair their reputation. I accepted the gifts, but did not give them what they desired. I remained quiet and distant. Susan called when they were not home. She was staying with Gabriel and receiving actual care. Not for cancer, but for our family's anguish. She stated that she was seeing a therapist and felt stronger. When she asked about me, I told her the truth. My folks were acting fake nice, but I didn't believe them. She said to hold on because she was working on something. Her voice sounded different and more confident. School became my getaway. Mrs. Henderson kept a tight eye on me. She'd ask how things were at home and genuinely listen to my responses. She allowed me to eat lunch in her classroom when I didn't want to be among other students. She never pushed, but I knew she was present. One day, she gave me a card with a phone number. She said that it was for a counselor who helped children in difficult situations. I kept it disguised with Susan's phone number. My parents' marriage began to break apart. They blamed one other for Susan's condition. Mom claimed Dad had been overly forceful with the papers. Dad claimed Mom's greed had been too blatant. They battled constantly when they assumed I couldn't hear. They would sometimes forget to cook dinner because they were so preoccupied with squabbling. I learned to prepare sandwiches and consume cereal as meals. It was lonely, but calm. Then Gabriel showed up again. This time, he had a lawyer with him. They sat down with my parents and discussed the scenario. The lawyer had gone over the police report and the videos from my camera. She said there was sufficient evidence for a custody challenge. My parents could either agree to a temporary placement with Susan or engage in a public dispute. The lawyer employed heavy words, but his message was clear: comply or lose everything. My parents attempted to fight at first. They hired their own lawyer and leveled accusations against Susan and Gabriel. They claimed Susan was unstable, and Gabriel was a stranger to me. They presented themselves as worried parents safeguarding their child, but their lawyer recognized the facts and advised them to compromise. Fighting would result in everything coming out in court. Their reputations would be totally shattered. The negotiations were tough. I wasn't allowed in the room, but I listened through the door. My parents wanted to keep me while saving face. Gabriel and Susan wanted to keep me secure yet lawful. The lawyers debated for several hours. Finally, they came to an understanding. I agreed to spend weekends with Susan and weekdays with my parents, but there were certain stipulations. My parents had to go to counseling and allow supervised check-ins. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. The first weekend with Susan felt like breathing anew. She had taken a tiny flat near Gabriel's home. It featured 2 bedrooms and a small kitchen. She adorned my room with posters and fairy lights. We spent the entire time discussing and playing games. She prepared my favorite meals and allowed me to remain up late. It seemed familiar in a way that my home never did. Going back to my parents was difficult. They were morose and bitter. They adhered to the deal, but barely. They would make snarky remarks about Susan and Gabriel. They'd ask leading questions in an attempt to dig out dirt on me, but I'd learned not to answer. I'd shrug and say everything was okay. They couldn't make me betray Susan again. They saw that the balance of power had shifted. Slowly, things improved. Counseling helped a little. My parents learned how to better mask their darkest tendencies. They stopped publicly threatening and manipulating. They even apologized once, but it felt empty. Susan became stronger and more independent. She got a job and began establishing a life. Our weekends became sacred. She would arrange expeditions and teach me new things. I learned how to cook, plant, and stand up for myself. The last confrontation happened 6 months later. My folks had been following the rules while arranging anything. I overheard them discussing moving out of state. They believed that by leaving, they would be breaking the pact. They would lead me somewhere Susan couldn't follow. They were looking into schools and dwellings in remote locations. The old fear returned. I couldn't let them take me away from Susan again. I informed Susan immediately. She did not panic, as I had expected. She contacted Gabriel and the attorney. They had been planning for something like this. The lawyer submitted emergency filings to the court. She said my parents were going to break the custody arrangement. She had documentation of their previous actions and current intentions. The judge took this seriously. My parents were ordered to appear and explain themselves. Even though I didn't have to testify, going to court was terrifying. I sat with Susan and Gabriel as the lawyers argued. My parents' lawyer claimed they simply wanted a fresh start. Our lawyer provided evidence of their pattern of control and manipulation. The judge questioned my parents directly about their plans. They lied and claimed it was only an idea, but the judge did not believe them. She had seen cases like this before. The ruling altered everything. The judge granted Susan primary custody. My parents received supervised visits twice a month. They couldn't take me out of state or make important decisions. The judge stated that my safety and well-being came first. My parents were upset, but they couldn't do anything. Their lawyer advised them to be grateful for whatever visits they received at all. The evidence against them was damning. They attempted one final deception. They wailed outside the courts and begged me for forgiveness. They admitted they made faults but still loved me. They agreed to be better parents if I gave them another chance. For a second, I felt guilty. They appeared shattered and desperate. But then I realized how many times they had injured Susan and me. I remembered the locked doors and falsehoods. I shook my head and left with my true family. Life with Susan and Gabriel was all I had hoped for. Susan legally adopted me 1 year later. My parents didn't argue about it. They had relocated to another place and started again. They sent cards for my birthday, but I did not answer. I heard they told everyone I was gone at boarding school. They couldn't even confess the truth to themselves. But I stopped caring about their falsehoods. I had truth, love, and safety. Susan never had cancer, but she was sick in a different way, from years of neglect and abuse by her family. But she improved with treatment and support. She taught me that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about who shows up and stays. It's about who loves you when you're difficult and protects you when you're weak. Gabriel became the uncle I never realized I needed. Mrs. Zhang remained with our neighbor and friend. Even Mrs. Henderson stayed in touch. The fictitious ailment that sparked everything became a bizarre blessing. It revealed the truth about my parents, freeing us both. Susan's frantic plan for love resulted in a genuine relationship. She had hoped they would care about her death, but instead she met individuals who cared about her life. I discovered that the biggest lies can disclose the deepest realities. When my parents believed Susan was dying, they revealed their true personalities. Their selfishness and depravity could no longer be masked. Everything felt different during Susan and Gabriel's first few months of living together. Susan let me decorate my own room in her apartment. We went to Target, and I chose purple bedding and these wonderful starlights for the ceiling. Gabriel helped us build racks for my books. It was the first time someone had asked what I wanted my area to look like. School seemed strange at first. My parents had informed everyone that I was staying with relatives for a time due to family concerns. Some children asked inquiries, but I simply shrugged and changed the subject. Mrs. Henderson checked on me to make sure everything was okay. She would grin at me in the halls and even slip an extra biscuit into my lunch bag. Having adults who genuinely cared was strange, but pleasant. Susan obtained a job as a receptionist in a dental clinic. She'd leave for work dressed professionally in her blazer, and her hair was growing back in gentle wisps. Gabriel assisted her in purchasing a used car, allowing her to avoid taking the bus. On weekends, we would go grocery shopping together, and she would let me choose one junk food item. She taught me how to compare prices and use coupons, which my parents never bothered with. My monitored visits to my folks were uneasy. We would meet at this community center, with a social worker there. Mom would send cookies that were clearly store-bought, but claimed to have been homemade. Dad would question me about school and seemed to be interested in my responses. They would protest about the supervision, claiming it was unnecessary. The social worker would just scribble notes and remind them when 2 hours were up. Mom tried to give me an expensive necklace during one of our visits. She described it as a family treasure from her grandma. I knew she was lying because I had seen her buy it at the mall years before, but I accepted it and said thank you. She gave me a hopeful expression, as if I were softening toward them. When I brought it to Susan later, she told me I could keep it or donate it. We ended up selling it and spending the money on school supplies. Susan began attending therapy every week. I would occasionally accompany them to family sessions. Dr. Kim, the therapist, was a pleasant lady with plants all over her office. She assisted us in discussing difficult topics, such as how I felt bad for preferring Susan above my parents, or how Susan still felt the need to earn affection. Dr. Kim explained that mending takes time, and that was fine. Around Thanksgiving, my folks began pushing limits. They wrote me a letter saying they wanted me for the holiday because it was family-oriented. Their lawyer forwarded it to our lawyer, who swiftly took it off. The judge had been explicit about the custody agreement, yet they continued to attempt. They would send gifts to Susan's apartment, along with letters about missing their daughter. Susan would ask whether I wanted the stuff, and I always declined. Then they arrived at my school. I was walking to the bus when I noticed Mom's car in the pickup line. My stomach sank. She pulled down the window and said she just wanted to talk, that she had something important to tell me. I knew I shouldn't get into the car, but she seemed so normal and sad. For a split second, I considered doing it. Mrs. Henderson then emerged and asked if everything was all right. Mom drove away without saying another word. The school summoned Susan, who arrived to pick me up. She wasn't angry, but she was afraid. We headed straight to the lawyer's office. It turned out that my parents had violated the restraining order by attending school. Their supervised visits were suspended awaiting a hearing. They attempted to pretend it was a misunderstanding, but security footage showed Mom waiting for 20 minutes. The judge was not impressed. Following the incident, Gabriel put a security system in Susan's flat. Nothing fancy, just a few cameras and an alarm. He taught me the code and ensured that I understood how to utilize it. Susan also purchased me a cell phone, despite the fact that I was too young to get one. She programmed all of the crucial numbers and taught me how to dial 911. We practiced safety plans without making them terrifying, simply being prepared. Christmas with Susan and Gabriel was incredible. We bought a tiny tree and decorated it with ornaments we made ourselves. Susan couldn't afford many gifts, but everything she gave me was thoughtful, including new books from my favorite series, art tools, and warm socks. Gabriel came over, and we baked cookies from scratch. Genuine ones, not store-bought. We burned the first batch, but the second turned out perfectly. My folks sent a Christmas card with a lengthy letter inside. It discussed forgiveness and second chances. They enclosed a snapshot of themselves in front of a Christmas tree, looking stunning. I presented it to Susan, who asked what I wanted to do. I pondered about it for a bit before throwing it away. I didn't need their phony, perfect family when I had one that genuinely loved me. Winter gave way to spring, and life resumed its normal rhythms. Susan and I spent Fridays eating pizza and Saturdays going to the library. Gabriel taught me how to ride a bike at the park. We attended free concerts during the summer and museums when it rained. Susan's hair grew back curly, which she found strange given that it had previously been straight. She appeared healthy and pleasant, unlike the sick and fearful lady who arrived at my parents' door. The custody hearings occurred every few months. My parents would appeal for increased access, and the judge would consider everything. They would always claim to be reformed. They'd bring certificates from parenting seminars and letters from their therapist, but they'd never explain why they locked Susan up or attempted to remove me from school. The judge saw through their act, just as I did. Susan once sat me down for a serious conversation. She claimed Gabriel had been offered a position in another state. It was a terrific opportunity, but it meant relocating. She wanted to know how I felt about it. Part of me worried about leaving everything familiar, but then I realized the only thing keeping us here was my parents, and they weren't truly in my life anymore. I promised Susan that I'd go wherever she went. The relocation happened quickly. My parents found out and attempted to stop it legally. They accused Susan of kidnapping me or alienating me from them, although the judge had already granted the relocation. As long as they could continue to have their monitored visits via video call, the arrangement stood. They were enraged, but powerless. For once, the system protected the appropriate individuals. Our new city was bigger, but it felt nicer. Susan landed a better job at a medical clinic. I started at a new school where no one knew my background. I became friends with Amy, a girl who collected pebbles, and David, a boy who enjoyed the same literature as me. Their parents were ordinary and uninteresting in the finest sense. Nobody tried to take insurance money or lock people up in basements. Gabriel now lived only a few blocks away. He came over for dinner twice a week and helped me with my schoolwork. He was dating this teacher named Patricia, and she made the finest lasagna I'd ever eaten. She had 2 children from her previous marriage, and they were like relatives to me. Suddenly, I had an entire extended family who wanted to involve me. The video conversations with my parents lasted approximately 6 months. They'd sit stiffly in front of their computers, asking surface queries. How was school? What did I read? Do I like my teachers? I would respond quickly and keep an eye on the clock. Sometimes the connection would conveniently fail, forcing us to end early. Eventually, they began missing calls. Then they stopped scheduling them altogether. Their lawyer wrote a letter stating that they were giving up parental rights. They wanted to get on with their lives and believed the situation was unhealthy for everyone. Susan inquired if I knew what she meant. I did. They were officially giving up on me, but they had given up on me much earlier, when they chose money above family. The legal thing was simply paperwork catching up with reality. The adoption was finalized on Tuesday. Susan wore her nicest dress, and I wore the outfit we chose together. Gabriel and Patricia arrived as witnesses. The judge was not the same as the one in detention, but he was equally courteous. She asked whether I wanted Susan to be my legal mother. I said yes, louder than I intended. Everyone laughed, including the judge. She slammed her gavel and declared us officially family. We celebrated at this Italian restaurant, where they sang as they served dessert. The server placed a candle in my tiramisu and asked me to make a wish. I gazed around the table at Susan, Gabriel, Patricia, and their children. I could not think of anything to wish for. Everything I wanted was already present. So I wished it would stay that way, that the people who loved me would continue to love me. Susan faced additional problems in high school, but she was there through it all. She assisted with academics, boy turmoil, and friend disputes. She taught me how to drive in the clinic's parking lot on Sunday. She sobbed more than I did when I got into college. She assisted me with packing and settling into my dorm room. She called every week to check in without being too pushy. She was all a mother should be. I ran across my previous parents once at a grocery shop in our hometown. I was visiting Mrs. Zhang, who still resided next door to their home. They appeared older and smaller. Mom's gorgeous hair has gray roots. Dad had gained weight and lost his confident demeanor. They stopped dead in their tracks as they saw me. I could have walked away, but I did not. I simply greeted them and inquired about their well-being. They fumbled over their words, claiming they were all right and inquiring about me. I told them I was in college studying social work. Susan was wonderful, and Gabriel had just married. They nodded and made polite sounds, but they were uncomfortable. Finally, Mom inquired whether I had ever thought about them. I replied, sometimes, but not in the way she probably hoped. We parted ways without hugging or exchanging numbers. Susan inquired about it when I arrived home. I told her it was weird but not painful. For example, seeing teachers from elementary school or children you used to play with, people who were previously integral to your world but are now strangers with a common history. She hugged me and told me she was proud of how I handled it, that I'd matured into someone who could confront the past without becoming consumed by it. In reality, my parents' brutality served me well. They taught me what a family should not be. They taught me to spot manipulation and to appreciate true affection. Nothing else could have shown their true selves more than how they treated Susan. If they had been ordinarily neglectful, I could have spent years attempting to gain their favor. Instead, their excessive behavior allowed me to seek better. Susan never got sick for real. She remained healthy and lived a fulfilling life. She rose to the position of clinic supervisor and began advising other women fleeing abusive situations. She'd tell them about faking cancer to find love, which she found in unexpected places. Some felt she was insane, while others understood. When you're desperate for connection, you'll do whatever it takes. Gabriel walked me down the aisle during my wedding. Susan straightened my veil and told me I looked lovely. Patricia's children attended the wedding party. Mrs. Zhang sat in the first row with Mrs. Henderson, who had flown in for the event. My folks were not invited and did not try to go. That chapter was complete, and everyone had gone on. The family I picked filled me with joy. Years later, when I had my own daughter, I reflected on cycles and patterns. Until someone breaks the chain, hurt people will continue to hurt others. Susan broke it for me by showing up even after my folks pushed her away. By loving me even when it would have been easy not to. By battling for me while I was unable to fight for myself. She transformed her fabricated illness into genuine healing for both of us. I named my daughter Susan after the aunt who later became my mother. In the hopes of finding love, she shaved her head and starved herself. Who discovered it not in the family that had rejected her, but in the niece who needed her. We occasionally tell her the tale, in age-appropriate ways, about how families are formed rather than born. How love manifests itself in unexpected ways if you are bold enough to accept it. The original Susan, my Susan, is now a grandmother. She spoils my children and teaches them card games. She only tells them pleasant stories about my childhood. The difficult portions are history, which does not need to be repeated. We made it through and emerged stronger. That is what matters. Not the pain, but the recovery. Not the phony disease, but the genuine affection that arrived.